And with that, a minute ahead of schedule. Ready to get started. So while we assume that many in our audience today would already be fairly knowledgeable of beavers already, we did want to provide some beaver background for any less familiar with our favorite crepuscular critter. And if you don't know what crepuscular means, I hope that you will know by the end of our morning. Now, to do this, taking us back to our beaver basics is going to be Dr. Elizabeth Suddeth, who I've had the privilege of collaborating with since 2021 doing beaver work. And Dr. Suddeth is a professor of biology and environmental science at Georgia Gwinnett College in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And she'll be taking us back to our Beaver 101. So you can take it away, Elizabeth. I'll stop sharing.
And I will try to start sharing. Okay. Are my slides showing?
Looks like maybe they're loading.
Okay.
I'll let you know when they pop up. Okay, now they're there. Full screen.
Wonderful.
You're all ready.
So I'm come to you from the world of suburban Atlanta, where we have beavers everywhere. I am a stream ecologist, an ecosystem ecologist by training, but once I started studying streams with beavers in them, I decided to learn some things about beavers. And so now I give talks about beavers, but I'm not a mammalogist. So I first want to acknowledge up front an amazing resource, and that provides you links to so many more amazing resources. The Beaver Restoration Guidebook is produced by the federal government and is available for free online. I have an old screenshot here, version 1.0. We're now to version 3.0, and I encourage you, if you get excited by stuff you hear today, this is a great resource with so many references to other great resources to learn a lot more, and I thank them for some great beaver pictures I'm going to share with you. So I like to start with history of beavers. Previous to European colonization, beavers covered the entirety of North America with the exception entirety of the northern part of North America, just going down to some distance into Mexico. But across the arid West, it's hard to know their exact range because we don't have great fossil record. And we don't think they ever liked Florida, so that's not new. And of course, they would not have been super far north in the past, but they are actually moving now even farther north than this map as their range expands. We hunted them nearly to extinction across North America for furs. Those furs were used directly for wearing, also for making hats. So the classic man's fedora was most often made of beavers. And after Europe killed all of their beavers, they came and got ours. And for many years, we made hats for all of Europe as well as all of North America. Those fads died off. We stopped hunting beavers so much, and now they are spreading back across their historic range, often surprising people who don't remember there being beavers where they live and think that it's new or bad or invasive, but it's actually just part of being a beaver now that we're not making hats out of them anymore. Beavers are rodents. They are the largest rodent in the Americas aside from the capybara. And there are two important adaptations that make beavers different from other rodents. The teeth you can see here really are bright orange. They have iron oxide in them to make them very, very hard. They are self-sharpening. And then as you can see, their teeth their incisors that they use for cutting things are separate from the rest of their mouth. And in fact, they can close their lips over their other teeth, which is very handy for chewing on wood underwater. The other important adaptation of beavers that you're familiar with probably is the tail. The tail is handy for swimming, for construction purposes, and for signaling. And they would do a warning slap of the water when there is a threat, and that is a message to the rest of the community. Beavers do live in community. A couple will mate for life, and they will then have living with them their children of the first year, which can range from 1 to 10 kits depending on location. Here in the South, we tend to have smaller litters apparently. And then also the adolescents stay around for at least a year and help raise their siblings. And so they're living in a family group. And so being able to signal danger to the family group is really important. And that's what the tail's used for. Their habitat preferences. In general, beavers prefer small to medium-sized, low gradient streams with open valleys. In other words, places that are easy to build a dam and flood. They also live in large rivers. And around here, we know that they were living in the Chattahoochee when they were extirpated everywhere else. But they don't build dams on large rivers. They tend to live in burrows in the banks instead. And so they're less obvious there. And many of us know that they live anywhere they can find water to live in, including lakes, wetlands, stormwater ponds, estuaries, anywhere there's water with access to food. So let's talk about food. Beavers are obligate herbivores. They eat plants, and so they need enough vegetation for food. Their favorite food is the inner bark of their preferred tree species. Number one are willows, aspen, cottonwood, and alder. Number two, and more common around here, are things like sweet gum, beech, and birch. Oaks, hickories, and tulip poplar are less common, but they definitely eat them. And the literature will tell you they generally avoid conifers and red maple. In my experience here in Georgia, they eat those just fine. I think that our beavers have gotten used to loblolly pines and are okay with them. They also often eat not just the inner bark of the tree, but the leaves of some of the trees. They like cattails a whole lot, including the tubers, and you'll see them actually diving down and burrowing and to dig up the tubers. And they eat lots of other wetland plants as well. In addition, obviously, to getting these great trees and all this great food from vegetation, they also use it as construction material for their dams and their lodges. They will also gather existing debris dams in the stream, or just build a dam right on an existing debris dam in the stream. They will gather already fallen wood on land that's dead wood and use that in their construction. And really, they'll use almost anything. And I'll show you some pictures supporting this. Anything that's easy to grab, they will use in their construction. So here is a classic beaver dam. This is in Blue Heron Nature Preserve in the middle of Atlanta. They had been doing just fine there, building lots of great dams. And this is a classic lodge. So the dams are constructed for flooding. The lodges are where they live. If they live in a lodge, they may also live in bank burrows. And so this is a very classic lodge. This one actually, as you can see, doesn't have as much wood in it because it's built in the middle of a reed canary grass marsh. And so it's got a lot of herbaceous material and just lots of mud. Here in Atlanta, this is a more classic, very urban dam. And I love this one because if you can see here, that is a wooden chair that the beavers found and added to their dam. They will gather whatever they can to put in their dam. And so this is our tapestry site in Ormwood Park in South Atlanta. And then this is the lodge at that site. And as you can see, these beavers are very well adapted to living around people and do not mind the apartment complex right next door and do not mind the basketball that washed into the pond. So why are they doing all this? Seems like a lot of work. The number one reason beavers build dams is to increase the area flooded by the existing stream or wetland. And this is because swimming is easy and walking is hard. And if you look at the shape of their body, that makes perfect sense. They are adapted to swimming. They are not good at walking. Flooding also allows them to dive away from their predators. We do not have, especially here in the Southeast, predators who are eager to get into the water until you go a little bit further south and you get to alligators. Most of our predators do not follow their prey into the water. Obviously, flooding increases their foraging area. It gives them access to vegetation, more and more vegetation. And so as they eat the stuff closer to their home habitat, they will increase the flooding to get to new vegetation. It allows logs and branches to float for transport. That's much easier than carrying them. They also use their ponds for storage of harvested food for easy access. It's basically a refrigerator. You take cut fresh vegetation, you put it in cold water, and it stays fresh longer. It keeps the entrances to their lodges and burrows underwater to protect from land predators. And so their kits are fairly developed when born, but still they have the safety of the lodge that no predator can get into. In cold climates, not really our situation, deeper pools maintain liquid water even when the surface is frozen. And so they can continue to swim year round and use the entrances to their lodges year round. Another cool thing that they do is to expand their territory is cut channels, canals. And so this is an example of one at that same site in Atlanta where you look close, you can see the little paw and tail prints where they have expanded their canal here. A quick summary, ecological benefits of beaver, why we're so excited about them. They create pond and wetland habitat, not just for themselves, but for plants and all kinds of other wildlife, especially amphibians, turtles, all kinds of birds, water birds, and songbirds, and other mammals. It increases the base flow of the stream. And so in drought years, especially in the arid west, this keeps streams perennial longer and makes them less likely to dry up. They decrease the peaks of urban storm flow, reducing erosion during storms. Dams improve water quality by trapping sediment. And those wetlands pond areas behind the dams allow microbial storage and removal of, or storage and or removal of nitrogen, phosphorus, metals, pesticides, and pathogens. So that was just a very quick introduction. Stay tuned to hear so much more about beavers. And I think we are not taking questions. We're just going to transition on. But put your questions in the chat.
Jane, you're still muted.
Thanks. You would think at this point we would know that. Well, thank you very much for your talk. I was just saying that I feel like even as someone who would say I know quite a bit about beavers, every time I still feel like I learn new things. Now, next, our next presenter is going to be Dr. Sandra Clinton. Dr. Clinton is a research associate professor in the Department of Earth, Environmental, and Geographical Sciences at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dr. Clinton is a freshwater ecosystem ecologist whose research focuses on the hydrology, water quality, and biodiversity of urban streams. In her most recent research, she and her students have asked questions about the success of urban stream restoration, impacts of stormwater, and anthropogenic litter in Charlotte streams. While Dr. Clinton is interested in all beaver ecosystems, she is particularly fond of urban beavers and how their ponds can be a nature-based solution for improving urban water quality and conserving freshwater diversity. So it's your turn, Sandra. Oh, you're muted, Sandra. So we're even.
We're even. All right, can you everybody see my slides and hear me?
Yes, you're all good.
All right, so thank you, Jane, for that lovely introduction. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. And also great thanks to Elizabeth for setting me up so well to talk about urban beavers. I'm going to focus on water quality in this presentation because I can't talk about everything about urban beavers. I could go on all day about them because they're great. So urban beavers are everywhere. And there are a lot of cases on the internet where people have been mapping urban beavers. This is a map on the left from Denver, Colorado, where, let me get my laser pointer here. Ooh, look at that fancy one. Where all these red places are where people have mapped urban beaver sightings. Seattle has a long history of documenting their beavers, and there's a reference here that will come out when we share the slides from Bailey et al. In 2019, showing beavers in the greater Seattle area. I don't know if I don't think my video works. I don't think I can make that work, but that's a beaver walking across the land. We also have lots of urban beavers here in the Southeast. And so I just did a really quick search of the word beaver on iNaturalist for the state of North Carolina and Georgia. I chose those two states only because those are where I'm presenting some information for today, and also because I live in North Carolina. And so each of these red dots are places where people have documented beavers when they've been out. And you can see from across the state, both states, that there are a lot of beavers. And then if you focus in on a couple of cities, I chose Charlotte and Atlanta. Each of the blue dots are where people have seen or think they have seen beavers or beaver dams or beaver flooding. And so I also want to emphasize that this actually underestimates the number of beavers we see in urban areas. I know from experience and from the people I work with in Atlanta that there are way more beaver sites than are documented in iNaturalist. So just kind of to give you an on-the-ground look, Elizabeth did a really good job of that in her presentation, but here are a couple of more. This is one of my favorite sites in Charlotte. You can see here this neighborhood. This highway over here is the Interstate 485. And this area right here is a set of beaver ponds. There's 3 ponds here at the bottom and a big beaver wetland here at the top. This is one of my favorite beaver dams up in Huntersville, North Carolina. It has the more typical structure that I think people think about with beaver dams in terms of it's actually very tall. It's 5 feet tall. And you can see all that wood structure. And then a couple of pictures from Atlanta. Here's one of the Atlanta beaver dams. Beaver dams in urban areas are really good trash collectors as well, which can be a good or a bad thing, depending on how you want to talk about that. And just to prove that, yes, there actually are beavers, we are not making this up. Here is a wildlife camera shot of a beaver from Atlanta. And I have almost exactly the same shot of a beaver in Charlotte. So as Elizabeth already talked about, beavers and beaver ponds, beaver habitats provide all of these ecological benefits and are the reasons that we like them. All of these benefits also occur in urban systems. And I'm not going to talk about all of these today. I'm just going to focus on water quality for the sake of time. And so these beaver ponds, we can consider them as nature-based solutions for improving urban water quality. And so what is this water quality problem? For all of you that work in cities and live in cities, you are familiar with the fact that as we grow our cities, we put in more impervious cover or hard surfaces. Because of that, water doesn't infiltrate, it actually runs off to our streams. And as it runs off to our streams, it can cause increased flooding, which is a really big problem here, particularly in the South. I think many of you have just come through some really big storms the last couple of days and perhaps seen some good urban flooding. And with that flooding, we also have the input of nutrients and other pollutants to our freshwater systems, to our streams. And so, well, what do? We build stormwater ponds, so human-made stormwater ponds to mitigate this runoff. So we build these ponds that captures the water. We treat it from the bacteria that are in the ponds, take up the nutrients, convert them, and then either infiltrate the water or release the water back to the stream. Well, beavers do that for us. So beaver ponds urban beaver ponds are collecting runoff, storing water, and potentially retaining nutrients and sediment and before releasing it downstream of their dams. And so that is what we've been interested in. The group that I work with from Chapel Hill in Atlanta is understanding the role of these beaver ponds in terms of both hydrology and water quality. So I'm going to show you some data from Atlanta first. So our study has been set up where we have six urban stormwater ponds, and in the case of Atlanta, they have 4 beaver ponds across the city. One of those beaver ponds is actually a restoration site with beaver dam analogs. And these are in relatively small watersheds, around up to 10 square kilometers. And again, these are urban sites, so up to 68% impervious cover. And I'm going to talk about dissolved organic carbon. And so I can't talk about every single nutrient again, so I've highlighted a couple here. And so DOC is important because it's the fuel for the microorganisms that regulate chemical and biological processes in fresh water. And so what we did is we measured DOC in the water coming into the pond, and out of the pond. And so this graph, you can see here's the concentration of DOC from 0 to 20 milligrams per liter. And these values are the p-values. So if these values are all greater than 0.05, which means the water coming into the beaver pond and in the pond are not different. And the water in the pond and leaving the pond are not different. And the water in terms of DOC concentration coming in and out of the pond are not different. And so we don't see any differences in DOC as water moves through this pond for the beaver sites. When we look at the stormwater sites, so we see something completely different. Especially we see that the water coming into the pond is different than the water in the pond. And especially important, we actually see an increase in DOC in the water leaving the pond. And so when you compare these two sites, we can see that DOC, there's less of this compound leaving the pond. And high DOC can actually be a water quality problem, particularly because it can also complex with different pollutants and affect how those are moving through the ecosystem and especially food webs. The other interesting part of this is that even though this DOC is lower, it actually is as yummy. We can measure how yummy it is for microorganisms. And it's as yummy for microorganisms as the DOC leaving the stormwater pond. So we have a lower concentration, but it's as nutritious for the bacteria. When we compare the ponds, we can also see that the water leaving the stormwater ponds is higher than water leaving the beaver ponds. And so we have this really big difference between how stormwater ponds and beaver ponds are operating, and potentially for beaver ponds to be better in terms of regulating DOC downstream. We did the same experimental setup in Charlotte, but I'm going to talk about a different nutrient here. So we have 3 stormwater ponds and 3 beaver ponds around the Charlotte region. This is Charlotte here. Our watersheds are just a little bit bigger in some cases here. And I want to talk about total phosphorus. So total phosphorus is a concern for water quality because when we have more phosphorus, we often get algal blooms, which can then lead to very poor water quality. And so this is the same graph that you saw earlier with DOC in terms of the framework. And so we have concentration of total phosphorus on the bottom, beaver ponds and stormwater ponds. And there are a couple of things that are really interesting here. One is that total phosphorus behaves differently than DOC. This is not surprising. Each nutrient or constituent is going to cycle differently in these systems. And so we really need to think about water quality as a complex of nutrients and pollutants, not just one. But when you look at the beaver ponds, we see that there's no difference as water moves through the pond in the total phosphorus. Interestingly, there's no difference in total phosphorus as water moves through the pond in the stormwater ponds either. But what is different is that there's a lot more total phosphorus in the stormwater ponds than there are in the beaver ponds. And so, especially if you look at the water coming out of the ponds, and we're thinking about these ponds as retention devices and water and as structures that would improve water quality, phosphorus leaving the stormwater ponds is higher than phosphorus leaving the beaver pond, which then can impact downstream communities in terms of fueling eutrophication. So thinking about eutrophication, let's just look at the ponds and not just the ins and outs. So one of the other things we did is we measured algal composition just in the ponds. And for those of you that work in cities and are familiar with stormwater ponds, having eutrophic or high nutrient concentrations in our stormwater ponds is the issue of actually across the US, but particularly here in the Southeast. Ponds often get lots of nutrients from runoff and they're often open to sunlight. And so algae just blooms in them. We get a lot of big algal blooms. And more recently, we're starting to see how harmful algal blooms in these ponds. Harmful algae produce toxins, which particularly can be have a negative impact on wildlife, or even the person, if you're walking your dog and your dog drinks the pond water, it can be harmful to your pet. So when we look at stormwater and beaver ponds, overall, we see that both algae and algae in both the stormwater and the beaver ponds is mostly green algae. But if you look at this slice, which I've blown up here for you, you can see that a larger fraction of the algae in the stormwater ponds is actually this blue-green algae. And here's an example of blue-green algae. And it's blue-green algae particularly that we are really interested in with water quality issues. They are the organisms that can produce harmful toxins. When you hear about those harmful algal blooms on the coast or up in the Great Lakes, these are the same organisms. And so seeing these blue-green algae in our stormwater ponds is not indicative of good water quality. And so we can see in our beaver ponds that we have much less blue-green algae. I want to switch scales a little bit. And Jane, you might want to wave at me at like 15 minutes or 5 minutes before, because my counter is not going. I want to change scales a little bit. So that's comparing stormwater ponds and just the beaver ponds. But beavers, particularly in Charlotte, build these large beaver complexes. And so I want to just talk about their role in water quality as well. This is a site in Huntersville. You can see that the beavers moved in 2018 and built their first pond. They just built 2 more ponds last year, which surprised us. We didn't think there was any more space to do that, but they did. And so we have this series of ponds as they've moved upstream, and they've basically ponded about 1% of the entire watershed. There is 500 meters of pond or of dams in this area, and the shortest dam is 2 meters long, and the largest dam, which is associated with pond 1, is 82 meters long, and then the average height's about 2 meters in this area. And what we can do is that we can measure the water coming in and out of each pond and look at how much retention of nutrients do we get through this system. And so I'm only going to talk about ponds 1 through 4 because we haven't updated our data yet. As I said, they just built these new ponds and completely ruined our study. No, they enhanced our study. And so I'm just going to talk about the data we have right now through pond 4. So this is just an in and out model. So we have water comes into the pond, and then we have water from the pond and water coming out of the pond. And so we have water level monitors, water level data, and flow data, and then we have nutrient data. So we can actually look at how much material are each of these ponds retaining. And then to balance our model, we also have data from our tributaries, precipitation, which could be another source, and then the hill slope runoff from this side with the development of the neighborhood. So what do we see? Let's look at water. This is summarizing all the aspects of the ponds, but I really want you to focus on this green box. And water is flowing from pond 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, and then it's leaving that complex. So this is the time that water spends in each of those ponds. And so you can see that most upstream pond, water is staying there for about an hour. Compared to the most downstream pond, it's about 16 hours. We have data from before the beavers came into the system, and that same stream distance when there were no beavers was about 3 hours. So the beavers have increased water retention in terms of with using these ponds by about 26 times over the non-beaver condition. And so as Elizabeth had mentioned, right, that these one of the aspects of having these beavers is that we have a lot more water just sitting on the landscape, which can allow for different ecological benefits, including processing of nutrients. So let's look at a couple of nutrients. This might look a little busy. Basically, all you want to look at is here's the water coming in. The red numbers is how much. In this case, we're looking at total suspended solids, so the sediment that's in the water, and which is a pollutant, particularly in streams where it can be impact water quality for the organisms, and also it can be an issue for water intake for drinking water. And so the red just indicates how much in terms of kilograms is coming in, is moving through the system. And then we can look at, as water moves into a pond and out, what is happening. So in that first pond, 11% of the TSS that came into the pond was retained. And if we look at the whole, and then you can follow this down through the whole system. And if you look at the whole system from top to bottom, it is retaining about 39% of the TSS. So the water leaving at the bottom of the complex has less TSS than the water that came into it. The ponds do most of the retention. One of the things we've learned from this modeling effort has been that below the first beaver, if you go downstream of that very first beaver pond, the most downstream one that was built, there's this huge wet meadow that exists. And this wet meadow is actually operating a little different than the ponds, depending on the nutrients that are involved. So in terms of TSS, because it's a large area that's wet, allows sediment to drop out, it is actually retaining sediment as well. Not as much as the ponds, but it is contributing to it. When we look at another nutrient like nitrate, though, we see something different. So overall, the complex is retaining nitrate. So 52% of the nitrate that came in upstream is retained in the system as it moves downstream. So we have less nitrate leaving the system than came in. And again, we're interested in nitrate because it can impact, it can also enhance algal growth. It can impact if your stream is you're pulling water for something else, it can impact your industrial or drinking water processes. And so nitrate is a nutrient that we would like to have low. What is interesting though, is that overall it is retaining nitrate. What's interesting is that the wet meadow is actually operating differently. And so the wet meadow is actually exporting nitrate. So overall the system is retentive, but just that one piece is exporting nitrate. And this is really interesting to us because there's not a lot of this type of information for urban systems. And it really helps us. We really need to be thinking about, if we want to maximize how we beavers and water quality, we need to understand that the structure of the complexes are going to influence nutrient retention, and also potentially the age of the structure. So if we had just been looking in 2018, we might have seen different numbers than the whole system. But then also incorporating the role of these wet meadows at a smaller scale could influence how we look at retention. And this summer, actually, we have an undergraduate student who's only focusing on the wet meadow and trying to get better data for it so we can really look at what's happening with nutrient retention in it.
You have 4 more minutes, Sandra.
Perfect. So I just want to end with, and there's going to be another talk more about some of this information, so I'm not going to go in a lot of detail, but we really can't talk about ecological benefits of beavers in urban systems without acknowledging beaver-human conflicts. We live in the urban systems, and so do the beavers. And this is going to lead to a conflict. And so one of the aspects that a lot of people are concerned about is around flooding of homes, the impact on our local riparian forests, and then beavers, they love to build dams right near culverts and block culverts. That's one of my sites, and this was early, before they started building more dams, there was a sewer manhole. That sewer manhole is now completely underwater because of the structure of the wetland that the beavers have created. And so that could be a problem for the people that have to manage that infrastructure. And then here on the bottom, these are data from Sarah Ledford's lab at Georgia State, one of her students, where based on some modeling of potential beaver sites showing that at least 15% of the beaver sites in Atlanta are within 120 meters of a culvert. This is not a problem in my mind. This is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to think about how can we manage beavers on the landscape, but also to think about when we replace culverts, maybe we should be thinking about culverts that are less attractive to beavers. And there are mechanisms and designs that can do that. And so we should be thinking forward about incorporating our infrastructure to be more beaver friendly. The last thing I'll say is one of the other things I hear when I talk to people when I'm out in the field is, what happens if the dam breaks? Where's all that sediment going to go? And so one thing I will say is that all of the beaver complexes that I've been working in urban areas, they are incredibly stable. I'm not saying the dams couldn't break, but they're not breaking. These large complexes are not breaking with every storm. And then not just unique to urban systems, but there's a lot of urban stream restoration here in the Southeast. It's another part of the work that I do. And so beavers love a restored stream. It is their favorite place to go. We just built them the best habitat. And there are conflicts because once a beaver turns the stream into a pond, it's no longer a stream, and many of the metrics we use to evaluate restoration fail. And so we need to be thinking about new ways that we can monitor beavers in these restoration sites. So I hope I've demonstrated that beavers are good for water quality as well as other ecosystem benefits. They are here to stay. So we need to figure out how to deal with them. And then finally, just acknowledge my lab, my students, as well as my collaborators at Georgia State, and then Elizabeth, you already heard from, and as well as UNC Chapel Hill, and their students. And thank you. And I will stop sharing, maybe, as soon as I find the button.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you. I think I do. Oh, I found it. Sorry. There we go. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I guess we couldn't have a virtual webinar without a hiccup, and our first hiccup being that our next speaker has not logged onto the call, and I've not heard from her this morning. So we're gonna have to pivot a little from our agenda, and I'm hoping our next speaker, Lauren Taylor from the Beaver Institute, is ready to go. Lauren, chime in if that's an issue.
Yes, I'm here. Give me just 1 second to shove my cat off of my desk and get my presentation up.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you do that. I'll get your introduction underway. So coming to us from the Beaver Institute, our next speaker might not currently be located in the Southeast, but for the purposes of this day, we have to mention her Kentucky roots. So she is one of us. So Lauren Taylor is the Beaver Corps Program Manager at the Beaver Institute, where she leads national efforts to promote beaver coexistence strategies through training and education. She is a certified wildlife biologist and earned her BS in wildlife management from Eastern Kentucky University and is currently pursuing an MS in wetland ecology at Utah State University. Prior to focusing on beavers and wetland restoration, Lauren spent a decade researching and monitoring eastern bird population and worked as an avian biologist with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. She currently resides in eastern Idaho, where she became passionate about beavers after witnessing firsthand how critical beaver wetlands are for the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Since joining the Beaver Institute in 2022, Lauren has been instrumental in training professionals in practical, science-based techniques for human beaver coexistence. She is deeply committed to solution-oriented wildlife management and empowering landowners and land managers with effective, equitable tools for living alongside wildlife. Lauren is especially excited to bring this knowledge back to her southeastern roots and foster a broader understanding of beavers as ecosystem allies. We were so excited to have a representative from Beaver Institute join us today to talk about the Beaver Corps training program and these practical approaches to living with beavers that were kind of perfectly ended in Sandra's chat. So, Lauren, when you are ready, take it away.
All right, let's see if I can share my screen correctly here. Okay, so can you see my screen? I just need to put it in presenter mode.
Yes.
Oh, maybe it's sharing the wrong screen. Okay, hold on. Sorry. Let me try again. Okay, now can you see my screen?
Let's see, I see a slide bringing in the human element.
Oh, sorry, jumped ahead here. Let's go back. How about that one? Can you see that slide? No, let's switch it over. There we go. How about now? Did I fix it?
Yes, now you're good.
Yay! Sorry, guys. I don't use Teams very often, so I kind of figured that I would probably do this up. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jane, for the introduction. As she said, I am very excited to get to speak to you all today about living with beavers. So without further ado, let's jump on into this. Before I start talking about those damn good solutions, I first want to bring in the human element just a little bit here. So when we talk about wildlife conflict, it's really easy to focus on the animal, its behavior, its habitat, and its impact to humans. However, wildlife conflict doesn't exist in that type of vacuum. It actually emerges at the intersection of animal ecology and human values. So if we're going to talk about those beaver conflicts, we also have to talk and provide effective solutions, We also have to talk about people. We need to understand their perceptions, their land uses, emotions, their livelihoods, and even their relationship to place to better understand how we can coexist with beavers if that is our end goal. And we ultimately want to provide effective solutions to conflicts that they are experiencing. All right, so I just tossed out a couple of terms that you're going to hear me talk about during this presentation and to just set us up to make sure we're all on the same page as what I mean. I defined human-wildlife conflict in this presentation as struggles that emerge when the presence or behavior of wildlife poses an actual or perceived direct and recurring threat to human interest or needs, leading to disagreements between groups of people and negative impacts on people and or wildlife. Now, coexistence has a bit of a debate going on what the actual term means, but for the context of this talk, I define coexistence as a dynamic but stable state in which humans and wildlife co-adapt to living in shared landscapes where human interactions with wildlife are governed by effective institutions that enable long-term wildlife population persistence, social legitimacy, and tolerable levels of risk. Oops, there we go. All right, so to set us up to be successful in providing solutions for wildlife conflict, in particular beaver conflict, we have to understand some of these very important components of human dimensions and how they will ultimately dictate the approach we use for communicating about beavers and determine what conflict resolution techniques are appropriate. I'm only going to talk about 3 today. That's values, attitudes, and perceptions. So values are enduring beliefs about what is fundamentally important for an individual. They guide decisions across context and tend to be culturally embedded and very slow to change. Attitudes are positive or negative judgments about a specific thing. That could be beavers, policy, or management actions. And they influence how people respond to conflict. Whereas perceptions are subjective interpretations of reality and how people understand risk, causality, or responsibility. Just a second here. All right. So another way to frame this for those of you who are not embedded in social sciences, values, I like to think about it this way anyway. Values are like the foundations of a house. They are deep, stable, and rarely changed, but they support everything else we build on in terms of how we understand the world and how we make decisions. Think of attitudes as the walls and the rooms. They reflect how we structure our thoughts and feelings about specific things, like how much space we give to a certain issue or how open or closed we feel about it. Whereas perceptions are the windows. They shape what we see, but from inside the house. So 2 people can have very similar foundations, their values, and they can even have similar walls, their attitudes, but they look out 2 different windows from inside their house and they see very different things. So in the context of human-wildlife conflict, people may argue about what they see through the window or how the room is arranged, but in sometimes these conversations need to go much deeper, all the way down to that foundation level, to those values, to establish a lasting understanding, find compromises, or to promote desirable behavioral change, such as encouraging coexistence in a predictable way. All right, so understanding if the source of human conflict is driven by values versus something like perceptions will ultimately help us in figuring out how to get to our end goal, which again could be coexistence, but in some cases it could be other means of resolving beaver conflict, because in some scenarios the values might be so strong that coexistence might not actually be the best approach. So ultimately, it's important to understand those underlying values, attitudes, and perceptions related to beavers in your region, because there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all messaging or strategy that's going to ensure success everywhere. It's very much regionally based. So it's very important to understand those contexts locally. All right, and then finally, we need to remember that coexistence is mutually beneficial for both humans and wildlife, and understand that whenever we go about messaging. Okay, so now that we have covered the importance of human dimensions as a necessary precursor for coexistence, let's move on to those damn good solutions for beaver conflicts. And the rest of my talk, we're going to talk about common beaver conflicts, conflict resolution techniques, and a little bit about our Beaver Corps training program. So primarily, beaver conflicts are related to tree and crop damage and flooding. And the way we resolve these conflicts differ based on the individual scenario and the site circumstances, along with that human element or the property owner that we're dealing with. So I'm just going to cover tree and crop protection, very briefly. Trees and crop damage can be effectively resolved by protecting the trees and the crops with some type of a physical barrier. And I have 3 highlighted here on the screen. You can find more detailed information on how to utilize these techniques on the Beaver Institute website, so please check that out. But there's several methods out there. Tree fencing is kind of your standard practice that we see all the time for beaver chewing issues, where you can use a woven wire fence to fence off individual trees or groups of trees. Similarly, electric fencing can be effective at protecting large groups of trees. You wouldn't really use this practice on an individual trees, but this is actually a very good technique that's gaining momentum, particularly in the Pacific Northwest in protecting orchards. You can also use sand painting as a great technique for folks who are looking to protect their landscaping, for instance, because it has a bit of a more aesthetically pleasing appeal. You can match the color of the paint to the tree that you're trying to protect. It includes sand grit that is a taste aversion for beavers, and that is why this is an effective technique. However, I do think it's important whenever we talk about sand painting to remember that as the diameter of the tree decreases, the effectiveness of this technique also decreases. So that is just something to consider with what you have at your particular site. And then ultimately, if we want to shoot for coexistence, we need to consider sacrificing some of those trees to allow beavers to have forage and building material and allow them to remain on landscape. If we actually fence off all of the trees, we would effectively be removing that resource for the beavers, and it really wouldn't lead to coexistence. The beavers would probably leave that area. Okay, so next we're going to talk about solutions for flooding and damming behavior. And you're going to see here on your screen that we have a sliding scale that is indicating how long or short term each of these techniques and solutions are for alleviating flooding pressure. So at the bottom of the list here, we have culvert clearing and dam removal. And these techniques are effective at resolving flooding pressure, but at very short-term intervals. And that's because beavers can dam culverts extremely quickly. Anyone who's worked with removing or clearing culverts from beavers know that sometimes they can build it right back overnight. And so these are quite short-term solutions for flooding pressure. Next, we have trapping, and I do include lethal or live trapping in this category because they are on the same playing field in terms of how long this technique is effective. So the reason this technique is in this moderate category and in this range is because the suitable habitat that initially drew the beavers to that area often remains. And so what that means is as long as that habitat is there, new beavers will often move into that area, even if the old colony has been trapped and removed. And so this will be a recurring event and require consistent trapping. So it can provide some medium term relief from flooding, but it's not going to be a very, very long-term relief, and often will need more attention as you go. And of course, this is very dependent on the surrounding beaver population in the area, but it still is a pretty moderate level of relief. Okay, so next we have flow devices and culvert fencing. Now, these are the longest term and most cost-effective solutions for flooding relief, and we're going to talk about them in more detail as we go. There we go. All right, so we just covered several techniques, and the way that we determine which technique to use is always based on a professional site assessment. We use different techniques based on the type of beaver dam that we're seeing. That can be a freestanding beaver dam that we saw in some of those pictures earlier, or it could be damming a man-made structure. And so we use different techniques based on these categories. And all of our techniques are effective because they use beaver biology. So first, we're going to touch on culvert fencing. So beavers typically choose locations to dam where the smallest dam creates the largest pond possible. And man-made structures like culverts are very appealing for beavers to dam because humans have created a pinch point in a stream that requires very little effort for a large pond, to be created. So culvert fencing works because the fence actually increases the dam distance to 30 or 40 feet, whereas previously the culvert may have only been 3 to 5 feet of distance. So, and then the design also pushes the beavers further away from the culvert as they dam, which decreases damming stimulus. And we have a keystone shape that we try to utilize whenever we can in streams. And by doing so, this widens the fence face, allowing more water to flow through the face rather than the sides. And that reduces damming stimulus due to the movement and flow of water. You can see this better in this picture, where you can see that the fence perimeter is significantly increasing the damming distance required to plug the culverts. The beavers are pushed away. You can see these white arrows as they start to build at the culvert entrance and they continue to dam. They go further and further away from their target, which is the culvert. And the fence space increases, reducing the flow of water coming into the sides of the fence. And all of these combined decrease damming stimulus, making this a very effective technique. Clicker, there we go. All right, so next we have diversion dams. And so for those of you who are familiar with low-tech process-based restoration and beaver dam analogs, this is a very, very similar concept where we actually encourage beavers to dam upstream of the culverts on our diversion fences while allowing the overflow of the stream to still pass through the culverts. We ultimately don't care if there is a large pond created behind the dam. We just want to prevent the road from flooding. So we only use these types of techniques in areas where a large beaver pond is not going to impact property or infrastructure. And they work because we are creating a dam within 10 to 12 feet of the culvert, which reduces beaver stimulus to dam the culvert itself because there's already a dam that's very close in proximity. And we also encourage damming on the fence by creating cascading water sounds, which is a really big stimulus for beavers to build. And so they tend to build on the fence rather than the culvert in these scenarios. All right, so next we have flow devices. So flow devices regulate the water level by creating a permanent hole in the dam and setting the pond depth at the height of the pipe. So basically, however high we set the pipe, that is dictating the water level. And we're only going to talk about two types of flow devices today because we don't have much time. And those are flexible pond levelers and fence and pipe devices. Now, do you understand that if you are interested in the Beaver Corps training, there are a lot of other techniques out there, but these are the two for today. All right, so first we have pond levelers. So as I said earlier, we choose techniques based on the type of beaver dam that we're seeing at a site. So pond levelers are used at freestanding beaver dams. And for any beaver dam pipe system to work, it must be designed so that the beaver cannot detect the flow of water into the pipe. So a properly designed pond leveler works by surrounding the submerged intake of the pipe with fencing, enough fencing to prevent the beavers from getting close enough to that intake pipe to detect the flow of water. If beavers can detect the flow of water, they will plug the entire intake fence, and we have seen that happen before. So it's really important that these are built properly. In these cases, because of that, because we do have to make sure that the beavers can't detect the flow of water, there has to be at least 3 feet of water depth that is tolerable at a site for this technique to be recommended. And the reason why this works is because beavers can't detect the flow, and so they don't plug the pipe, and there is a permanent hole that's created through the dam, which is regulating the water depth. All right, so next we have fence and pipe flow devices, and this flow device we use at man-made structures, so like for a culvert, for instance, or a spillway. This device combines a beaver exclusion fence, so a modified version of our culvert fence that we talked about earlier. This is significantly smaller because we actually don't care if damming happens on this fence. And it combines that with a pond leveler pipe system. Now, this is by far the most successful long-term cost-effective solution for beaver flooding. It has a 99% success rate, and it requires very little maintenance for it to operate and function smoothly. So again, this technique does still require that 3 feet of water depth because of that intake cage that you can see. Oh, wait, let's see. There we go. Okay. I was looking for my little red arrow. So there's an intake cage in the back of this pond, similar to the slides that we saw earlier. And so because of this, we need that 3 feet of water depth. But we actually don't care if the beavers build on the fence. And as you can see, this particular system has been in place for a very long time, and beavers have built a significant dam around this fence that's protecting the culvert. And you can see very clearly that this device is still very successful. So for the same reasons, beavers cannot detect the flow of water, and we have a permanent hole in the dam, and that is why this is successful. All right, so several years ago, there was a beaver management study that took a look at how flow devices are the most cost-effective way to provide long-term solutions for beaver flooding. They took a look at 19 different sites and determined that flow devices save $180 per site every year. That same study, where it was looking at flow devices compared to trapping, these are the success rates for flow devices and trapping. You can see that over time, trapping success rates do decrease and flow device sites remain stable. But I do think it's important to note in some scenarios, trapping is the best solution or the only solution to alleviate beaver conflict. So while it might not provide the most cost-effective or long-term solutions, it is still a tool that is necessary to use in some contexts. So I just want us to be aware of that. And if anyone is interested in trapping, you should always check with your local Fish and Wildlife agency to see what your regulations are and what options you may have. Okay, a couple more slides here. I know I'm tight on time. So So part of the Beaver Institute's vision is to resolve human beaver conflicts across North America. And we accomplish this by training professionals in our methodologies and our techniques. We have a Beaver Core training program that incorporates a design that meets everyone's timeline. It's broken up into two parts where we have online lessons in part one. This includes coursework that covers in-depth beaver biology, in-depth flow device concept and design, including new methodologies that are continually being adapted. And then we also have a part two, which includes mentored flow device installations, where students are required to complete four flow device installs or LTPBR projects that are all mentored directly by a Beaver Institute team member. Our training currently is divided into two different training tracks where we provide tailored approaches and resources to folks who are looking to start a consulting business to implement these types of techniques, versus our non-business training track, which is geared more towards agency professionals or nonprofits. And upon the completion of both parts of our trainees become certified beaver coexistence professionals. And our training is also pre-approved by the Wildlife Society for continuing education credits for anyone who's interested in maintaining that certification program. And with that, I just want to encourage everyone to visit the Beaver Institute website. We have a ton of content out there, and you can always contact me if you have any questions. I think maybe I'll drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to me directly. All right. And with that,
Okay, wonderful. And then let's see, Lauren, I have a couple more. Let's see if your slides. I hope my share with audio. We have a really exciting video that has come out of the Beaver Institute. Okay, so BeaverCon 2026 has been announced that it'll be in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Lauren, did you want to talk any more about this?
We probably don't have to talk any more about it, but if you want to flip to that next slide, that has the important dates for folks who might be interested in joining BeaverCon. Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, maybe we could stay on this slide for just a second in case anyone wanted to take a screenshot, just to kind of bring you up to speed on the timeline for what we're looking at for BeaverCon. But it's a great event, and I encourage everyone to be there. There's nothing quite like BeaverCon. As folks who've attended in the past, it's a really great opportunity to collaborate and see what's going on across the country. Even internationally, we had 7 countries attend last year. So, and I think 41 states, I believe. So yeah, encourage everyone to take a snapshot and come to BeaverCon.
Yes, and I can confirm, as I said at the beginning, I've been to the past 2 BeaverCons, and it is exactly, there's nothing quite like it. I have my BeaverCon t-shirt on right now from the one this past year. So certainly recommend take a look at these dates. You can also find all this information at the Beaver Institute social media or website. But we hope to see many of you there, especially from our Southeast region. But from there, our previous speaker, Tracy, has logged on, so we're gonna flip back and go back to her. So we should be back kind of on schedule now, but let me introduce her. So coming to us from Mobile, Alabama, our next speaker is actually only a recent joiner of the beaver coexistence movement, despite lots of previous work with other species. So Tracy Winter Glover, JD, is an animal caretaker, activist, author, and filmmaker. She is the executive director of Awakening Respect and Compassion for All Sentient Beings, also known as ARC, and Sweet Peeps Micro Sanctuary, a small sanctuary devoted to caring for chickens rescued from the meat industry. In all of her work, she tackles critical issues relating to animal rights, ethical consumption, and the ways in which human beings relate to and impact the natural world. I stumbled across Tracy's recent progress promoting alternatives to trapping to Alabama lawmakers and was inspired by her motivation and resiliency. And I'm excited to hear more about the journey, about that journey in this following presentation we're going to listen to. So it's your turn. Take us off, Tracy. I'm excited to learn more.
Thank you so much. And I am so sorry that I am late. I'm in the central time zone and I forget that the rest of the world is not. And so I really apologize for being late. But thank you so much for having me. I am going to have to watch the recording of what I missed. So let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Yeah? Good.
Yes, looks
okay.
Good.
Excellent. Okay. So you'll have to forgive me if I sound like I don't know much about beavers. I don't. Like Jane said, we recently got involved in some beaver advocacy, but beavers are, I knew nothing about beavers until just a minute ago. Sorry, let me see. I'm trying to just move this little screen so I can see my notes, and it doesn't want to let me. All right, hold on one second. Sorry. Okay, there we go. I just recently kind of went through a crash course in beavers, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what we recently have been going through in Mobile, and like walk you through some of the process. So like Jane said, I'm the director of a local animal rights group, ARC. Our mission is to raise awareness about the impact of our daily choices on other species and the environment, to inspire compassion for all sentient beings, and to help create a more sustainable, compassionate, just, and healthy world for all of us. And we tend to focus mostly on farmed animals, because just the numbers involved and how few people are advocating for them. But part of our mission has also always been to speak up for any other animals who nobody else is speaking up for. So in the past, we've advocated for Mardi Gras horses and rodeo animals and circus animals, and now beavers. There we go. So forgive me for sharing this slide, or this photo, which I know is disturbing. This was, though, the first post that made me aware of the issue. And I was horrified. So you can see, this was a post that a local news station shared. And there's the post was just that the city of Mobile was working to manage, quote, nuisance beavers, and then they show this wheelbarrow with all of these beavers that have been killed. And when I first saw this post, I was horrified. I didn't even know that we had beavers here. I commented. I didn't really know what I was talking about. I think my comment was like, they should be relocated. It turns out it's actually illegal to relocate beavers in Alabama. And I obviously, though, wasn't the only person who felt this way. So you can see there are like over 3,000 engagements with the post and over like almost 2,500 comments. And most of the public, not all, but most of the public was felt the way I did. So you can see these comments like, why not just relocate them? This is inhumane. They need to be relocated. I think we all just have the same instinct, like why are we killing them? And just a few more comments. Again, I mean, the one thing is I was encouraged at least to see the comments like that the media, the story was so insensitive, but the public reaction seemed to me heartening, that people, just shared my same instincts. Like, why are we doing this? Besides the fact that, again, I didn't even know that we had these amazing animals in this area until I saw this post. So the first step was to try to do something, was to get the media involved. So like I said, part of our mission is to speak up for the animals that nobody else is speaking up for, and nobody else was advocating for these animals. So I knew we had to do something. And in the past, when we have reached out to the city directly, we haven't received a response. But once we've gotten media involved, they respond. So I signed up to address the city council, and I sent out a press release. And just one thing to note, and at the end, I think I'm going to just try to like summarize some strategies. But when sending out when reaching out to media, it's just really great if you can have cultivated relationships with people in the media who are animal friendly. But so we did get some media attention, got the story, and so by sending the press release out, I think the media is always interested in like any kind of controversy. And so the fact that there were going to be like activists showing up at the city council meeting like that, it's a story. And it kept the story alive. And not all of the coverage was as positive as I would have hoped it would have been, but a lot of it was. But again, the media kind of reflects the community, and some people in the media I think were sympathetic, and some weren't. So we went to the city council meeting. I had just a couple of other people came out to support the cause. And I addressed the city council. You can see there's this guy in the corner of this photo with his glasses off, and he was clearly not in favor of our recommendations. And the city council itself was clearly kind of mixed. I could see that as I was presenting. But so basically, like I went in, addressed them, and then had information packets ready to hand out to all of them. So I provided some information from the Beaver Institute, from the Human Beaver Coexistence Fund, from Animal Welfare Institute, and also from Outdoor Alabama, which I included something from Outdoor Alabama just because I think that often in our community, and maybe this is true in other, like I would kind of imagine this is true in other maybe smaller Southern communities, there is kind of a prejudice against outside organizations or like national organizations, and there's definitely a bias towards the more like local groups. So anyway, including something from Outdoor Alabama, and tried to highlight the ecological benefits of beaver dams, how just awesome beavers are, that humane solutions are more financially sustainable. And then we tried to offer some solutions. So information about devices like the beaver deceiver and flow devices. And yeah, just like some of some of what was in what we submitted, again, underscoring the ecological benefits, and that killing beavers is bad policy, for a lot of reasons, that there are ecological benefits to using humane methods, and that we can achieve all of our goals simultaneously. Like, we can both protect property and protect the animals. And then also, partially emphasizing the animal welfare, the animal rights, the humane aspects, and the public sentiment. But then again, also underscoring that a lot of these humane alternatives are also more financially sustainable. And then our specific recommendations were to immediately discontinue the current lethal program, to conduct research into the feasibility of humane alternatives, including the beaver deceiver and flow device, to consult with a trained engineer who could advise on the best tools for the specific areas involved, and to adopt a humane and ecologically sound management strategy that would protect the community, the local ecology, and spare the lives of these animals. And I tried to really, emphasize the whole philosophy of coexistence. But ultimately, I think I realized that the financial feasibility was maybe the most persuasive argument. But so at the end of my, after I addressed the city council, I got no questions, very, real, not much interaction. So I sort of sensed that, that would be the end of it if I didn't pursue it. So at the end of my comments, I asked who I could follow up with. And the chair told me I could talk to the director of animal control. Also, out of the 8 city council members, a couple of them, honestly, sort of laughed through my presentation. There was one council member, though, who after I had given my presentation at the end of the meeting, they give some closing remarks, and he specifically thanked me for coming out, thanked me for being respectful, said that they would consider the information. And then after the meeting, I went and I found the head of animal control, who also came out with the head of the Public Works Department, and they both expressed interest in learning more. So we shared contact information, and after the meeting, I sent them some additional information. I was actually in touch with somebody from the Beaver Institute who also provided me with additional information that I could share. And we went back and forth a few times, and they would thank me for sending more information. They would tell me that they were considering it, that they needed a little bit more time. I would check back in. And then it would be a little while. I'd hear back, and they'd say, we're still considering it. And then at some point, I stopped hearing back from them, and I really thought that I was being totally ghosted. I even told Jane at some point that I wasn't sure that you all would want me to do this presentation, because I felt like we had hit a brick wall. And then I heard back, and just when I was kind of I didn't know what the next step would be, I heard back that they are planning for the new fiscal they're planning for the new fiscal budget, and they are planning to hire someone new to implement, quote, many of our suggestions. So I'm taking this as a success, but I say, I think, because I don't know the details. They say that they're going to implement many of our suggestions. I don't yet know what that means, but we'll keep on it. And I know I have seconds left, so just last slide. Basically, I think getting the public on your side and involving media is often the way that we hold government accountable. Just so much depends on the individuals who are in these offices, and if you end up contacting somebody who's very sympathetic to the issues, then you may not need to involve the public. But if you're not getting anywhere, then getting the public involved can be very helpful to put pressure. But at the same time, I think that the whole attracting more flies with honey than vinegar, I really felt that when I first saw that post, I was so angry, and I started to go in with this real kind of activist anger, and I realized at some point that I needed to pull that back and be as professional and respectful as possible. Like I wanted to work with these people. I wasn't trying to attack anyone. I just wanted us to find solutions together. And I feel like I'm, like that has really proved to be the case. Like the head of animal control and the head of public works, they would not want to work with me if I was coming in, with that kind of like anger and belligerence, but also, being persistent, and being helpful. So one thing is like, they were very grateful for all of the information I could provide. Like they were open to it. They didn't know the information, but once I was able to provide them with it, then it just made their job easier. And so I think just being just helping them, help make their jobs easier, I think has been a big part of what's allowed us to make progress. And this is my contact information if anybody wants to reach out to me or see any of the other work we're doing. And I'm going to stop sharing. And I think that's it. And I'm just a little over time.
No, to be honest, you're 5 minutes. You have 5 more minutes. So if you want to keep going, you're welcome to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I rushed through that because my slideshow, I must have opened it. My slideshow timer told me I was over. So I was sort of rushing through. But okay. Well, just I guess, just to hit back on a little bit here. Let me see. Can I go back in? I'm not sharing right now. Let me see if I can share am I sharing right now?
No.
No. Okay, let's see. Oh, here we go. That is okay. That's not exactly the screen I want to share, but I think that's fine. I think it's fine. So yeah, I mean, just kind of looking back at the whole process, I think there are kind of multiple tactics that I think you have to balance. Like again, there's the getting media attention, I think is important, but there are some activist strategies can be just like all about getting media attention and kind of forgetting the part about working like cooperatively with the decision makers. And actually just like sort of a side note too, I found out it was like after I had addressed the city council and I was already in conversation with the city officials who were actually, sympathetic to the whole issue. I got an alert on my phone from PETA that had apparently gone out to like, anybody who's ever signed up for anything with PETA in the area, that there was that the city was killing beavers and, this sort of outrage and asking people to submit comments. And part of the post or, the message I got, I think I must have gotten a text alert and an email, but part of the message was that they had gotten no response from the city. And, and for one, I feel like, there was like a little frustration that there wasn't any collaboration, like that they hadn't contacted the local group who was actually working on it. But I wasn't surprised that the city hadn't responded to them because I think, PETA is like, honestly, I mean, everything that they recommended, it was, I'm almost certain it was exactly what we recommended. So it's like substantively, I have no disagreement with them, but it's just like so much about tactics. And that's it. As I think like, so much of making progress, it is about tactics. And I feel like, PETA's strategy is often just to get as much attention as possible, whether it's negative or positive. And I felt like, initially I did go in wanting to get attention, like wanting to get media attention. Absolutely. But then like once you're in and you're talking to these officials, then you just want to be somebody that they can work with. Like you want to be somebody that they want to work with. Some of the other also activists who came out to support us at the city council meeting, they were a little more like unruly. And I just knew that I needed to like create, even though I felt the same way they felt, I knew in that setting that I had to create some distance between myself and them so that the city officials would take me seriously. And so, I think it's just, again, it's like kind of a balance of tactics. Involving the media, doing whatever you need to do to create a story that they want to cover, but then also making sure that you are, just always being professional, respectful, and finding your allies, right, too. It's like I went in, I presented to the city council and the mayor, and there were a lot of people there who didn't want to hear it. They weren't interested. They come from a long tradition of hunting and trapping, and they don't see anything wrong with it. But there were a few people there who were open, and fortunately, those were people who were in a position to make a decision. So I feel like I've probably now used up my time.
Well, you have one more minute, 10:35, but you've made wonderful points so far. So great job.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to end my PowerPoint here and try to come back to you. And we're just doing questions at the end. Is that right?
Yes, questions at the end. And I saw a message in the chat that we will be sharing contact information once again at the end of the summit, so that you can contact all of these people individually.
Okay, fantastic.
But to move on to our next presentation, I'm very impressed with how well we're staying on schedule. You never know how that's going to go. But also from Kentucky, our second Kentucky representative, our next speaker comes to us just south of Louisville, Evan Patrick. He serves as the Natural Areas Manager for Bernheim Forest and Arboretum. He and his team manage over 16,000 acres of diverse habitats that include forest, prairies, glades, streams, and wetlands. His work centers on habitat and wildlife conservation, research facilitation, and environmental advocacy. In recent years, beaver habitat restoration and conservation have become an increasingly significant part of Evan's work. By employing a range of methods from large-scale engineered stream restoration to low-tech process-based techniques, the team at Bernheim has successfully enhanced and rewilded 2 miles of stream and 16 acres of wetland and beaver habitat. We also want to give a shout out to Bernheim Forest and Arboretum. They were the group that sponsored our website. So that website we included at the beginning, www.southeastbeaver.org, was brought to us by Bernheim. So we're really grateful for that. And without further ado, Evan, it's your turn to tell us more about your work managing beavers at Bernheim.
Thank you, Jane. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, I can't take personal credit for the website, but we should thank Bernheim. Yes, thank you, Bernheim Foundation, for funding that. Let me share my screen here. Let me start by saying good morning to everyone. Thank you for coming. As Jane has mentioned, this is our inaugural Beaver Summit. I'm really happy to see so many folks here. Some folks that some of my colleagues from Kentucky, happy to see you all here, and additionally some colleagues from Bernheim. So, can everyone see my presentation now? Hear me well?
Yes, you're all good.
Cool. Okay. So thank you again, Jane. My name is Evan Patrick. I'm the Natural Areas Manager at Bernheim Forest. So today we're going to be talking about some restoration practices of wetland streams and beaver habitat within Bernheim Forest. And really what I'm going to focus on is the application of some of the topics that have already been discussed in previous presentations, specifically in Sandra's and Lauren's presentations. So we'll get to see some of the real life application of what that looks like. Before I jump into that, I want to tell you all a little bit about Bernheim Forest. Bernheim Forest is a 16,346 acre forest about 25 miles south of Louisville. We were established in 1929 by Isaac Wolf Bernheim, a German immigrant who came to Kentucky and ended up as a bourbon magnate and spent a significant portion of his fortune purchasing thousands of acres in central Kentucky that were to be preserved to connect people with nature, which is our mission. So of all the major focuses that we have at Bernheim, the Natural Areas team, we focus specifically on a handful of these. Ecological research. Bernheim Forest is a research forest, and we focus on ecological and biological research. Our team is responsible for not only in-house research, but also facilitating researchers to come into the forest. We participate in curiosity and learning. We host guided hikes and we do courses and lectures. At Bernheim, we have over 40 miles of trails. The Natural Areas team manages almost all of those trails. But a big portion of what we do in the forest is focused on ecological restoration and conservation, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Pardon me losing my voice. Okay. So when we talk about restoration at Bernheim, we really break it into two primary strategies. We look at active restoration, which is kind of what you see as an example of that in that forward picture, and then passive restoration, which you can see that pretty sizable beaver dam in the back there. And over this presentation, I'm going to be talking about some examples of both active and passive. So to kick us off on the passive, we're going to look at this aerial photograph of the interior of Bernheim Forest. So this image was taken in 1998. What you can see here is the Wilson Creek Valley. So as you follow my cursor here, this is a forestry road that our team utilizes to access the forest. And just below that, this road kind of follows the Wilson Creek right here. So this image is really representative of what management looked like during previous leadership at Bernheim Forest. There was lots of mowed property, lots of mowed habitat, with the idea that open lands need to be quote unquote managed, right? And what that led to was really limited riparian buffer. It led to limited wetland spaces and really kind of interrupted habitat connectivity. Fortunately, around the turn of around 2000, early 2000s, there was some leadership change, and since then there has been a significant change in how we approach management of our wild areas at Bernheim. So this next slide I'm going to show you. This was an aerial photograph taken in 2022. So while I talk about this, I'm going to kind of flip back and forth so you can see the difference. This is that same forest road that is almost impossible to see now due to the canopy coverage. And Wilson Creek is also right here. You can see it labeled right here. So I'm going to flip back. It's about a couple decades earlier. And you can see the significant canopy difference in these two images. So just in a couple decades, Bernheim has rewilded hundreds of acres, primarily riparian forest and wetland, but also prairie and glade. And you can see that prairie and glade complex right here on this western side of this slope here. And so what's happened with removing bush hogging and mowing from wild areas within Bernheim Forest, we've created a diverse mosaic of habitats throughout the forest, and that's just passive restoration. What we've found is that beavers really bridge the gap between active and passive restoration. Historically, beavers have been a persecuted species that's been taught, especially with our previous presenter talking about these issues with persecution of beavers and why they're persecuted. And that is still true across the country and was even true at Bernheim up to a couple of years ago. Beavers were removed from the Arboretum within Bernheim and relocated, and we have stopped that process now. That's changed in the past 5 years or so. What we've done now is not only allow beavers to exist, but we've allowed beavers to do what beavers do, right? And that is to create high quality habitat. At Bernheim and within the Natural Areas team, we consider beaver an umbrella species. And what I mean by umbrella species is if we can protect this species and the habitat of this species, we are protecting the habitat of thousands of other species. So same idea as a keystone species or similar idea to a keystone species, but in this specific case, if we can protect beavers and their habitat, we are protecting the habitat and species, thousands of other species within our forest. And that's one of the main reasons that we promote beavers within Bernheim Forest. So these next couple slides that I'm going to show are beaver habitat. Specifically, these are images from that aerial photograph. This is within the Wilson Creek Valley. So these are restored beaver habitat areas all through passive restoration, where we just have allowed beavers to exist within their habitat. Within these habitats, we have observed increased biodiversity within the beaver wetlands. What we hope to do, and this is anecdotal observations, because Bernheim is a research forest, and because of some of the success criteria that Sandra mentioned about restoration practices, we want to conduct some studies to document what biodiversity increase happens when beavers are allowed to create dams. I'm still in the process of trying to find the correct graduate students to get in here, and conduct that research, but I'm hoping we can do that in the next couple of years. At Bernheim, before this passive rewilding was allowed to happen, beavers frequently utilized bank wallows or bank burrows. Specifically at Bernheim, and I would like to hear about some other specialists and mammalogists, we think that lodges indicate established populations or specifically indicate successful wetlands. What we know about that is that when beavers are creating lodges within Bernheim, they are creating high quality habitat with their wetland creation. There are some studies that point to over a 100-fold increase in species diversity. And so again, we've talked about the benefits of the ecological services of beaver wetlands. This is another reason why at Bernheim we are protecting beavers and beaver habitat. Again, these are all images from Bernheim Forest. These are the areas that have been allowed to passively rewild, and the extent of these beaver wetlands is a direct result of that. Just to expand on some of those ecological services, carbon sequestration, all of that leaf litter that ends up at the bottom of these wetlands, habitat creation, water filtration that Sandra really hit on earlier, wildfire and climate resiliency, and this idea of refilling, recharging aquifers, and keeping streams perennial. These are the reasons why we promote and protect beaver habitat at Bernheim. So we're going to pivot now into some of the more active restoration that we're conducting at Bernheim Forest. And really, this can be divided into two major categories. High input projects that are on a large scale, and smaller, low input projects on a smaller scale, but we're still hoping for high yield on these projects. What we try to keep in mind with all of our projects, regardless of the scale of the project, is to take cues from beavers to restore stream, wetland, and beaver habitat. So to jump into some of this high input projects, I'm going to talk a little bit about our Harrison Fork stream restoration. So in this photo, this is actually another area of that Wilson Creek interior. And on this photo right here, you can see up against this hillside on the left, this is Harrison Fork. And so just to talk very briefly about some historic use of land within Bernheim and across the country, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when farmers started using these properties, they would literally move streams up against hillsides so that the bottom land was arable and farmable. What that does, unfortunately, results in streams that look like this. And so when this stream, this is Harrison Fork, this is an image of what you just saw from that aerial image. When this stream was pushed up against the hillside, it hit bedrock, right? It's not dynamic, there's no cover, very little habitat, so it's degraded habitat. Not ideal for amphibians, not ideal for fish, not ideal for beavers. And so we've been in the process for almost 2 decades now of getting permits and working with both the University of Louisville and the Wetland Studies and Solutions Incorporated company to design this stream restoration project. And so this is a conceptual plan of what this project looks like. We are currently underway in this restoration process. So what is currently completed is Area 1 right here. So the next couple slides I'm going to show you are what work has currently been completed. The company that we're working with, Ridgewater, they specifically work on stream restoration projects. They're now working on the earth moving on this western section along Area 1. So this next slide is an aerial image of what this stream restoration site looks like currently. So this is June 2025. What I want you to take note of, and it's probably difficult to see because this is an aerial image, is all of the woody debris that's been added. Where my cursor is over right now, that is an entire tree. So it looks like a small stick, but that is an entire tree. I'm sure Sandra could speak much more intelligently about this, but this woody debris in streams is indicative of older streams or dynamic streams. It's also indicative of beaver habitat, beaver behavior. When you have lots of woody debris in streams, you're often going to create a dynamic stream system. So that's what we're trying to do in this project. What's also difficult to see, because the channel has not yet been diverted into the new channel, if you follow my cursor, you can see that this is the new channel right here, following those pools and riffles. So once that the old stream is diverted into the new stream, all of these small wetland pools will be pools and riffles that creates that dynamic stream. And this is just the same site, just from the ground. So we're currently in the revegetation process. You can't move the water back onto these new channels until there's vegetation. Otherwise, everything will be completely eroded within any kind of high water flood event. So this is a years-long process, but hopefully in the coming year, we'll be able to use this large pile of dirt back here to plug the old channel and move the water into the new channel. The next two images, these are images of a restoration project that was designed by the same folks at the Wetlands Studies and Solutions and the University of Louisville. This was completed about 20 years ago. So this is 2 decades after these next two photos of what a restored stream looks like. I've walked this site with the folks that designed this, and they've learned some lessons, and we have learned some lessons about what successful stream restoration looks like. And the main takeaway is that in stream restorations, you always need more woody debris. So that's their one critique of this site, is that they would have added more woody debris to it to create that complex dynamic stream system. And that brings us to a really interesting point about what a reference stream should look like. So this is in Slab Camp Creek in eastern Kentucky in the Daniel Boone National Forest. So this is also a project that was done by the folks at the Wetland Studies and Solutions Incorporated and University of Louisville. They finished this project, I believe 15 years ago, but not long after they completed the project, the beavers moved in. And this is what this site looks like now. It really is, there's almost no noticeable flow. It's a series of cascading pools that feed into one another, a braided channel. And this is an interesting conversation that's coming up right now. What should a reference stream look like for stream restoration? Should it look like this? Should we change the success criteria for what a stream restoration looks like? I'm not going to dive too deeply into that. But if you're curious about that topic, Tony Abel, our founder of the Southeast Beaver Alliance, he will be discussing this during an EcoStream conference in North Carolina in Asheville in August. So if you want to talk more about reference streams and what we should be looking at reference streams, Tony's the man to talk to. One more big large-scale restoration project that I want to talk about is the Wilson Wetland Restoration. This was just completed. We restored 20 acres of wetland within the Wilson Bottom. Basically, we found an area with hydric soil, and we plugged the ditches that drained this site into a creek. The creek is located over here on the right side. And so we plugged these ditches and allowed this site to flood. We're currently in the revegetation process. We've installed a wetland mix on here, and we've put in some woody species, but already we've seen an explosion in biodiversity. And each one of these small pools that we've dug is just loaded with wildlife. This was a former beaver stronghold in this location. Since then, they have either been trapped out illegally without our, trespassing on our property, or they have dispersed. And we're not sure which has happened, but we're hoping with this wetland space that we can bring some of these beavers back into this area to enhance this site even further. The last kind of large scale project that I'm going to talk about is a spring house restoration. We got support from the Louisville Water Company to restore an old spring location. You can't see it in this photo, but behind this stone structure, there was a spring emergence, And in the 1970s, I guess as folks did in the 70s, they put a concrete cap on top of this spring, and it was not a natural emergence. It had really no functionality as habitat whatsoever. So we got some support from the Louisville Water Company to restore this spring. And so this was our design for this spring. You can see this kind of purple outline here. That's that stone structure. The blue asterisk, that is the spring emergence. And the idea here was to create 3 cascading pools to not only naturalize that spring emergence, but also create some wetland habitat in a very visible location. This is right in our arboretum, in between our visitor center and our event center. So it's a highly visible location where we wanted people to see wetland habitat. And so this was in summer of 2022 that we completed this project. And this is what the site looks like today. And this is just taken a couple days ago. So it's very successful, highly diverse, and very publicly visible habitat. What we found is that it was so successful that the beavers moved in, right? And what we have found with these restoration projects is that beavers enhance these projects. And so you can see here, up against this culvert right here, is a beaver dam. And so this became an issue because this might be a little trickier to see here, but these stones stacked underneath the water were part of a hiking trail that led from our event center to our visitor center. So this needed to be a walkable space. And so we had to implement some coexistence strategies to make sure that the beavers could still do what they wanted to do, but that the space was functional as a trail. So this photo was taken immediately following a flood event. And this photo was taken a couple hours after a flood event. And so you can kind of see right here, our small cage right here. We installed a flow device, as Lauren was talking about in her presentation, and it's been incredibly successful. The water level does fluctuate some with flood events, but it drains very quickly. The beavers are still able to dam, and they're still able to do their beaver behaviors, but our pond level, our flow device is working successfully. And this is the dam itself, and you can see our flow device right here, and that pipe flows right underneath this dam into the culvert. That's just a close-up of the shot. We have been doing some coexistence work across the Bernheim Arboretum. You can see Cody Ferguson here, one of our natural areas specialists, working on a flow device on a dam. And so we're still allowing, again, beavers to dam and do what they do, but without damaging infrastructure at Bernheim. So that's an ongoing project. We're still learning. We're not experts in that by any means, but learning how to work with coexistence and make sure that beavers can do what they do. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some low input projects and specifically beaver dam analogs, which I believe Lauren also mentioned as well. Really what we're trying to do here is mimic beaver behavior. And there are two goals with mimicking beaver behavior with these low input restoration projects. To create beaver habitat, and if we can't exactly mimic or create beaver habitat, pardon my cuckoo clock, then what we want to do is incentivize beavers to disperse into this site and improve the site. And this is all based on the low technology process-based restoration and building BDAs and sites that are appropriate for beavers. What you see here in this photo is kind of our first iteration, our first style of BDA or technique, where you slam in posts and then you weave branches in between it. What we found is that while this structure stays up and it doesn't really get blown out, it really doesn't hold back water. So it's not really mimicking behavior and creating beaver habitat. What we hope is that it creates a scaffold for beavers to come in and enhance this site. We haven't seen that. We've only had some success in that with these kind of first iterations of our beaver dam analogs. So what I'm going to show you now is kind of our second iteration. I spoke with some folks at BeaverCon in 2024, and we're trying to do this new, more accurate mimicking of beaver behavior, where instead of just slamming posts in and using sticks in a woven style, we are using soil and we're using limbs, and we're laying the limbs down in the way that beavers would do it, parallel with the stream, creating a U shape to slow down water. And so this is that process. We're layering soil, and we're layering limbs, and we're layering soil and limbs to create that mimicked beaver behavior. And here you can see Patrick Likens, another one of our natural area specialists, after we've completed this project, and it was successful. We had really good success with this. It was holding back water. It was doing its job. However, we have found that we learned a couple lessons from this. This is the same site after torrential rain. What we've found is that in Kentucky, we have high relief, flashy streams, and maybe this type of beaver dam analog or this type of beaver mimicry doesn't work in Kentucky or specifically in Bernheim. So what we're moving toward is this hybrid style of where we're going to use posts and woven with the limbs that lay parallel as well. And I know I'm running short on time, Jane. I will keep going. So we hope to improve that iteration on our third iteration, which next week we are going to complete with Bernheim's volunteer group, which is known as the Beaver Brigade. So if you want to come to Kentucky and build a BDA, you can come join the Beaver Brigade at Bernheim. I just want to show this last slide really quick. This is one of our first BDAs that we built, and you can see that this is a successful BDA. But the reason it is successful is because the beavers came and enhanced this site. On the right side, you can see the human-made structure with the driven posts. Not long after this was installed, it failed in a flood event, and the beavers came back, and on the left side, they improved upon this BDA. So what we've learned in Kentucky, and specifically in Bernheim, is BDAs are successful when we can incentivize the beavers to come enhance those structures. So that will be the goal moving forward, is to incentivize dispersal, incentivize beavers to come and enhance these projects. And for me to split, I'm just going to show you some images of species that either directly or indirectly benefit from beaver wetlands at Bernheim. All of these images, save one, are from our environmental artist in residence, Carla Rhodes. And so we'll just run through these really quickly. So here we have a Midland mud salamander. We have a green heron hanging out on a beaver dam within Bernheim Forest. A bobcat, we think mother, hanging out on a dam at Bernheim Forest. Our blue heron on that same dam. A mink, which we have found really utilizes beaver wetland spaces. And then this photo is not from our Carla Rhodes. This is just a trail camera. Bittern, which was not seen in Bernheim since the 1950s. This was one of the rewilded spaces where beavers built dams and lodges, and we're pretty confident that the bittern has shown up because the beaver created that habitat. The one creature that might rival cuteness and charisma from the beaver is our river otter, which has shown up in almost all of our beaver wetlands. And of course, the star of the show, the beaver itself. So that's it. Thank you, folks.
Wow, well, thank you for that, Evan. Those photos were phenomenal. Those are great, which then leads perfectly into our next talk. My slides up again, because as I was deciding on the order of our presentations, I honestly put our next speaker last because her headshot suggests that she will have even more adorable photos of beavers in her slides. And what better way to jog everyone's attention after, staring at a computer screen for a few hours than adorable photos of beavers. But Evan also had some great pictures to provide. So Dr. Morocco is a wildlife rehabilitator and researcher in Mississippi who is conducting studies on North American beaver health, physiology, and behavior. Permitted as a wildlife rehabilitator and to conduct scientific research on beavers, she oversees the beavers being cared for at the 35-acre nature sanctuary managed by the nonprofit Something Wild. Dr. Holly Morocco has worked in the field of wildlife conservation for over 25 years with expertise in behavior and reproduction. She received her PhD in animal physiology from Mississippi State University, where she specialized in bottlenose dolphin reproduction. She is the primary author of 28 scientific publications, including peer-reviewed journal articles on bottlenose dolphins, killer whales, Pacific walrus, and spotted eagle rays. Dr. Morocco has worked around the world helping to understand and conserve wildlife, and her award-winning research was the focus of a full-length documentary by the BBC called Walrus, 2-Ton Tusker. She is passionate about scientific communication and understands the importance of providing accurate as well as understandable science to the public. Dr. Morocco is excited to be working with the Southeastern Beaver Alliance to help bring awareness of the importance of beavers for conservation and to help with human and beaver coexistence. Now, Holly, please hit us with some more adorable photos of you holding little cute beavers.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me get my screen shared here and pull up my presentation. All right, I'm gonna hit screen share. There we go. All right. Can you confirm that you're seeing my screen?
Yes, you are all good.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm super excited to be here. So I thought it would be this is a great opportunity to discuss, some of the things that we want to focus on here in Mississippi and how we're connecting research with rehabilitation with North American beavers. So I won't go through, you did a wonderful job in my bio. Thank you so much for that. Just really quickly again, I am a permitted wildlife rehabilitator. I also am permitted for scientific research for beavers and do a lot of social media content. So to start off, we're going to hit this Keep Beaver thing right away. The video that launched a dream, many people probably have seen this video. If not, I'm going to show a little quick clip here. So this is Sawyer, and Sawyer was a beaver that was part of the very first cohort of beavers that we've ever rehabilitated. At the time, I was working with Woodside Wildlife Rescue. I wasn't permitted myself, and they had asked for help with beavers. And so we ended up with three beavers. I had never been around a beaver, didn't know the first thing about a beaver, but immediately it was love at first sight. And Sawyer here was a really, really fun, had a great fun personality, and just absolutely loved my son Colton. Spent a ton of time in our house, lived outside during this at the time that this video was shown, but every day would come to our back door wanting back inside the house. And for whatever reason, Sawyer decided that this hallway needed to be dammed up. And this was one of the first things, well, I posted it on YouTube just because I thought it was cute, and then it just took off, and now the internet pretty much owns this video. But it was my first inspiration that, wow, this is very interesting. Very interesting from a behavioral standpoint, very interesting, I just realized that there was just a lot we didn't know about beaver behavior. And so working with these guys in a rehab setting could potentially be a great option for learning more. And so this was the spot that Sawyer always chose to dam up. And we still have no idea exactly why this was the spot. And now, fast forward to today, we went from living in a very residential urban area where we were rehabbing those first three beavers to building our dream. We now live on a 35-acre habitat in rural Hancock County, and we have built, through a lot of trial and error, we have been able to build a multi-phase beaver rehab and release opportunities. I'm going to show this video. So basically, this is phase one. And this is the area where we have these extra protected enclosures set up. Every beaver that needs to remain separated for whatever reason, when they come into rehab, can live in these fully enclosed spaces. They have 400-gallon pools. This is our little baby area for now. They also have that whole fenced-in area to explore. This is now, you're looking at phase two, and phase two is a 3-acre fenced-in piece of our property with a brand new pond that we just built. That's what you're looking at there. This will be phase two. It's a soft release site. It's also a practice area. And this is phase three, the final release area. We have a 3-acre pond. And whenever the beavers are ready for full release, this will be the site of which they are released. And it's just a very beautiful, exciting coastal habitat. So briefly, Something Wild is our new nonprofit. We fully operate off of generous donations, Patreon memberships, merchandise, and social media. Primary focus is North American beaver rehabilitation research and release. We are starting to take volunteers and college interns. We just had our first college intern successfully come in and assist us, and it was absolutely wonderful, great. And so now we're excited to continue extending these opportunities for interested college students and volunteers. My real job is with Mississippi State University, where I'm studying One Health, coastal One Health in particular, and just basically connecting the health of humans is tied to the health of wildlife, and ultimately, of course, the health of wildlife depends on their habitat. And I'm primarily, I still study bottlenose dolphins as my primary indicator species for human health along the coast, but I'm now including beavers. And this particular, my program there operates off of grant funding. And then together, I've merged my worlds, Mississippi State and Something Wild. And so with our scientific research permit that we have for the state of Mississippi, we are pursuing a lot of different types of research opportunities. We're just getting started, and I'm going to go through some examples. So before I do, really quickly, beavers in Mississippi are classified as a nuisance. And this is something that is so important to the state of Mississippi that they literally have beavers and wild hogs as sort of the top priority for as far as nuisance species. Beavers being native, wild hogs, of course, not being native. It is a significant. Beavers are a significant problem in Mississippi, specifically because of. Let me see if I can get to the next slide here. There we go. Economics. It all comes down to money. And so Mississippi, along with the Wild Hog program, they do have a subsidized funding opportunity for landowners, so that they have essentially come up with, for every $1 they spend on these incentives and landowners trap and remove beavers, landowners can save money in damage prevention. And so the economic damages of beavers in the South is not anything, it's not a mild situation. They estimate these things, creating problems into the millions of dollars. But this is something that the South, the same reason why the South is dealing with all of this with beavers is because we have such great habitat for beavers. So I'm very, very acutely aware of these things. So understanding that we are dealing with a very, it is a very intense situation as far as, whenever especially you start talking about economic damages. So we are approaching it, this complex issue, with a very stepwise approach. And first of all, we are very thankful to the state of Mississippi for their willingness to work with us. It is a bit of a faith and trust issue to allow us to focus on this animal that is classified as a nuisance. We want to conduct research that's meaningful for resource management. We have now, the ability to provide a safe sanctuary for the release of these beavers. We're not just going to take them out, releasing them, in various places. And want to provide examples for coexistence, and also developing some strong husbandry procedures, veterinary care, understanding of behavior, and really, really understanding the health of these beavers and demonstrating that they're not the bearers of disease, that they create healthy habitats and they're not creating health issues for people. Get to the next slide. Here we go. So how or why do beavers end up in wildlife rehab in Mississippi? The number one reason is the orphaned infants that result from trapping nuisance beavers, or removal of beavers from a location. The babies are very cute and they're very helpless. And so oftentimes we have found that either the trappers themselves or somebody who happens upon the situation sees a little baby beaver there. That's how we end up with them in rehab. We also get injured adults that are due to getting hit by cars, gunshot wounds, trap injuries, attacked by animals, washed out to sea, etc. So we have 4 beavers currently in our care. We have Tulip. Tulip is living under our scientific research permit. She will be with a long-term resident with us. She was orphaned as an infant. We have Stormy Rose. We do not know her age. She was washed out into the Mississippi Sound and ended up on the grounds of the Beau Rivage Casino. And she was very malnourished, had anemia, she had bumblefoot, and a protozoan parasite that we are still actually working on identifying. It is a very unusual parasite that right now we believe is Balantidium, which is carried by wild hogs. So here's a interesting case that we're still working on. She's under our rehab permit. And then we have Sprout and Blossom. They're each about 4 months old, and they were orphaned due to trapping beavers out of a location that was for urban development. These two are not related. They came from two different groups, but we have them together mimicking a sibling situation. So I want to jump into Tulip's story. It gives a great example of sort of our mission and what we're trying to accomplish. So Tulip was found alone and away from water and as an infant in 2023. She was suffering from malnutrition. She had a really extreme case of pneumonia and bumblefoot. And pneumonia, of course, you can hear that picture where I'm holding her, she would wheeze when she was breathing. So it was very clear that she had, and then of course we had vet care. Bumblefoot is a condition that affects their rear flippers. And it is a very painful bacterial infection that can actually get into the joints. And most of the time, bumblefoot is associated with birds, but we are finding that beavers are very susceptible to that. Once she was strong enough, we did introduce her to two other kits that were her same age. And that little video clip that's playing, Tulip is the small one. She is the exact same age as that other one. She was just very stunted, just due to all of her issues. But you can tell she's super feisty. She is the little one, but she's already in charge of everyone. We had her outside, getting her ready for her full introduction to those older kits, and she was only out there for maybe a week, and she became seriously ill with a horrible skin condition. And the blood results showed that she was absolutely dealing with a horrible bacterial infection, and her adrenal glands were failing. And the cultures came back for Acinetobacter baumannii, and that is a deadly antibacterial resistant bacteria that is basically creating a skin, a flesh-eating bacteria, essentially, in simple terms. And she was absolutely she was not gonna make it. And there weren't many veterinarians who looked at her blood work who felt that she would. And sorry for those of you who might be a little squeamish, but I thought it would be really interesting here to show a blood draw in a beaver. This is poor little Tulip under some gas sedation, and we are able to do a blind stick on the underside of their tail. And there's a nice vessel that runs through there, and that's how we can draw blood from beavers. So I, not being one to want to give up, this little fighter, she wanted to survive. She never did want to give up herself. We gave her an intensive care treatment and lots of treatment plan, between surgical debridement of the skin, laser and phototherapy, daily injections of antibiotics and sub-Q fluids and steroids and topical medicine and little shirts. And she was in our home for 1 year. And we were able to actually pull her through. So here's a quick little video of some of the early days of treating this really horrific skin condition. She was on a lot of pain medication during this time, so she was not uncomfortable. But we found that to keep this medicine in place, putting these little preemie onesies on her was the absolute perfect choice. The veterinarians were absolutely on board with this. We needed a way to protect that skin, and so she actually did not mind wearing her little shirts. And so we are working up a case study for publication of her, all the specifics of the bacteria, the treatment that we did. So this will help with beaver medicine. And it's also very interesting that this bacteria, which is normally found more in hospital settings, was actually out in our soils. And so immune compromised humans could also potentially be affected by this. So it is a One Health connection. And then another thing that we're looking at is the cognition, the behavioral cognition of beavers. There hasn't been a whole lot looking specifically at beaver. And having come from the marine mammal world, where we obsessively study marine mammals and their behaviors, I find it quite surprising that here we have this incredible social creature of the beaver who builds these complex things, and we haven't spent much time actually looking at the specifics of their behavior. And so studying them in a rehab setting is proving to be pretty helpful. So play behavior can provide an insight into cognition. And so I just want to give 3 examples of play behavior that we have observed in our beavers. Locomotor, you're going to see Tulip doing what a lot of the guinea pig people call the popcorn behavior. And it's just a silly movement that they do when they seem to be excited about something. So here is Tulip. And that's a very excited Tulip demonstrating a locomotor behavior of popcorning. And it is something that that you will see these animals do. And then interacting with objects. We have found that our beavers do quite well with different types of enrichment, and they just absolutely love interacting with objects, even objects that aren't found in their natural habitats. But this is something, beavers are very busy and they have a lot going on. They need to be stimulated, and we have found that these, even though they're man-made objects, that they really enjoy interacting with these things, and it's offering an insight into that cognition. And for whatever reason, they absolutely love going through hoops, wearing hoops, swimming through hoops, interacting with hoops. It's a very fascinating behavior. And then social behavior. This is the baby beavers practicing their sumo wrestling techniques, getting prepared for maybe an epic territorial battle in their future. This seems to be something that is preparing them for those things once they become an adult. So they spend quite a bit of time. And even Tulip still enjoys a little bit of sumo wrestling with us, even though she is over 2 years old. And then play normally is associated with immature animals, but adult play is present in many mammal species living in complex social systems. And what we have found initially with our adult Stormy Rose, the adult beaver, only gave her natural items, branches and things like that. And then I accidentally left the hose in her pool overnight one night, and on the camera that I have set up to watch her she spends most of her awake time at night. I saw her pushing the hose out of the pool, and she was quite interested in it. So then I started giving her some of our toys, and she also has demonstrated an interest in interacting with these things, and it's giving her something to do in rehab, which I think enrichment is very important. So we're taking a close look at her behavior and her interactions with these things. And then another thing that social animals can demonstrate are social vocalizations, or vocalizations in the way they communicate. And so one of the things that has just been pretty amazing to be a part of is to hear the changes in these vocals. So I'm going to play. This is Tulip vocalizing towards the kits. Tulip has decided that she is, I think she must believe, these babies that have showed up, these orphan babies, she has accepted as part of her job, and she is helping to babysit and take care of them. And she started this new vocalization that you can hear there towards these kits. And that is a very specific vocal that she does towards the kits. And then in contrast, this is her when she greets me, which is a positive social greeting, but it sounds very different. Just a very low grunt. And then this is one of the babies who is doing a social greeting whenever I approached. very cute. And one of the things that we have noticed is that beavers are not shy about being quite clear of their affective states. Affective state is just sort of a fancy way of saying how they feel, their emotions. We have to be a little bit cautious when we start to talk about these terms, you know, from an animal behavior standpoint, and not attributing too many human emotions towards them. But affective states absolutely are indicative of sort of how that animal is feeling, whether it be positive or negative. And beavers, again, are quite clear on how they're feeling. This is Sprout and Blossom. Sprout is letting everyone know that he or she is enjoying that food. Blossom's technique is to grab as much food as she can and then run it back to the house. She prefers to eat alone. And then there's Tulip playing a great babysitting job, being very gentle with the kids. And then this is Sprout taking a little downtime. Sprout really enjoys a lot of cuddle time, or at least once a day, a little quiet time. Whoops, sorry. Back. So we have a lot of goals, and hopefully, you know, we will be, you know, applying for funding. We're doing what we can with what we have. Eventually, you know, I want to pursue different grants and things like that. But for the time being, we are doing the studies that we can, and this includes behavior and anatomy. I have actually been, this sounds crazy, but myself and those who know me, if we do find a deceased beaver, be it hit by a car, otherwise, I actually have vet students who are helping me do necropsies, and we are starting to study some of their reproductive anatomy, heart and respiratory rates of growth and development, the microbiomes and physiology, vocalizations. You see, I have quite a large goal there, but there are just so many missing pieces to beaver research. And so we're just getting started, and we are very thankful to be where we are. And then before I wrap up, we are working with a production company, and we are working on making a beaver documentary. And initially, this project was fairly small, and it was going to be, you know, a fairly, you know, a low budget, but really nice little production. And we've decided that people are really excited about beavers, and we want to scale this project up so that we can create a documentary that is on these big streaming services and can be seen around the world, hit film festivals and things like that. So we are looking for any executive producers or people who would like to learn more about helping fund this project. You can scan that QR code for more or contact, and my contact information will be available at the end. If you're interested, or you know someone who might be interested in helping us get this documentary up to scale. And that's all I had for now. I have a website. Find me on YouTube if you want to see cute videos of beavers, and that is my email.
Well, thank you so much, Holly. I mean, you just perfectly provided exactly what I was looking for. I'm sure you hear it all the time, but you're living my dream, and I would die for Tulip. I did want to see, I saw some messages in the chat. It looks like we didn't have access to the sound from that video. If you wouldn't mind, I know if you share your screen, there is like a tab to say include sound. If you wouldn't mind trying that and going back to that vocalization slide, I think people were really wanting to hear that. I know I do.
Yes, sorry about that. Let me see if I share content. Include sounds. Okay, let me go back and share those sounds with you. Apologize about that. Okay. Here we go. So this is Tulip's vocals that she started whenever she saw the kits for the first time and continues to this day. Can you hear that? Okay, I think you can. And then this is her little greeting that she does towards me. That little low grunt, that is just a hi, I'm happy that you're here. And this is one of our babies, a social greeting towards me. And then this is that cute little video. It also has sound. This is Sprout telling everyone that that's his food. And yes, they act like they're starving. I promise they are not starving. And then this is the little quiet vocal during snuggle time. And I think that was the only, yes, that was the only ones that had sound. So I apologize for that, but I'm glad that you reminded me and I could fix that.
Yes, no problem. Thank you for sharing. I truly don't know how you get anything done. I'm like almost in tears. I'm overwhelmed by cuteness. So I just love them.
I do too. Honestly, I am you would think by now I've had a wonderful career. I've gotten to study some pretty incredible animals, and I am completely melted every single day by these animals.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, I'm sure we'll have some questions for you as we move on to our last moment in our summit. Okay, so, well, first off, thank you so much to all of our presenters for their wonderful talks. So interesting. As well, thank you to our audience for giving us their time this morning to listen and for sending lots of great questions in the chat. I've already seen lots have been answered so far. As we enter into this last portion, which will include a panel discussion with our speakers. I'd also like to welcome SEBA, the Southeast Beaver Alliance's founding member, Tony Abel, to tell us a little bit more about himself, his visions for our organization, and then we will get into our panel.
All right. Am I on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, let me reiterate thanking all the people that have joined. I'm quite excited that the number jumped up to 99 and never made it to 100, but some dropped off. So I'm going to say we had 100 people on here at some point. So yes, and also thank you, Jane. What a wonderful conference you put on, and thanks to the speakers. Yes, I'm introducing myself. I'm Tony Abel. I worked at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for 35 years, and the most fun part of my job was doing stream restoration work. And during that time, I read the book Eager and realized how valuable the beaver were in partners in stream restoration. Got very excited. In fact, I was the manager of the Wetlands 404 program, and once I read Eager, I became very enthusiastic, and my staff they often heard enough about beavers and how wonderful they were. And so one thing, so when I retired, I started this Southeastern Beaver Alliance. I want to say I started it. However, it's the folks on this call that started it, along with some colleagues at Southern Environmental Law Center. And so once we got the beaver, this thing started, one thing I was looking at was at EPA was how to restore stream channels, and seeing that the beaver come in and do that work I realized they were really strong allies. And in reading those books, what I realized was that before we Europeans arrived in America, beavers were managing most of our streams. And Evan talked some about reference streams. I think Sandra talked about reference streams. And so oftentimes in stream restoration, we use reference streams we map them and use that as a template to restore damaged streams. And what we weren't realizing for a long time is that the streams that we see on the landscape today are nothing like what were on the landscape before we Europeans arrived. So when we trapped out the beavers, we lost the multi-thread channels that the beavers were developing. And also before we developed bulldozers and chainsaws and dynamite, our streams were chock full of woody debris. And now we think we have to remove that woody debris and make these single thread channels where most of the channels prior to us Europeans arriving were these multiple thread beaver complexes and log jams. And so that just changed my thinking towards restoration and coming back full circle. The reason I wanted to start the Southeastern Beaver Work Group is because they are such vital partners in that restoration. And so that's all an introduction. Oh, I do want to put in a plug for the BeaverCon. That was I went to that last year, and that is I would call that a truly spiritual conference to go to. Everybody there's all happy about getting beavers back into the environment. So Jane, I think we wanted to move over to start doing some question and answers. I was taking notes during the course of the talks and jotted down some, and I could go through in order of the speakers. Does that sound like a good plan to you to go in that order?
Yes, that sounds wonderful.
Okay. All right. So when Sandra was talking, Gracie was pointing out the collaborative Earth Beaver Lab and the remote testing that or remote sensing that they were doing for the beaver studies. And I think her question mainly was that had Sandra considered the remote sensing type work that they're doing at Collective Earth?
The short answer is yes. I'm very interested in that remote sensing work, just in general for our knowledge of beavers in the Southeast. And I've been having this sort of online conversation with Grace through the chat. For the urban systems, one of the questions we have is there are different tools for mapping potential beaver sites. And one of our questions for urban system is that a lot of these tools are generated or built in forested environments. And so how well do they work in urban watersheds is one of our questions. And so I'm really interested in looking at this tool that Grace shared with everybody, and especially looking at the urban watersheds.
All right, thanks, Sandra. Now, one question that you answered in there, Sandra, already was from Rachel, and she said, "Are your water quality images published?" And you answered in the chat that they are. So nothing for you to say there other than that you have published those images and people can find them. So Mara Dudley asked, "Are there other differences in terms of where the beaver ponds are located relative to stormwater ponds?" I believe that question is saying, in doing these studies, are you studying water quality effects of beaver ponds in a similar geographic location as human-built stormwater ponds? Oh, and Jane, my camera's not on.
Yes, I didn't know if that was a personal choice or you want us to see your pretty face. You're welcome.
No, I keep clicking a button and it doesn't show.
Oh, well, we hear you perfectly fine, but yes, we don't see you.
Yeah, I'm not all that pretty anyway, so we probably don't. It doesn't matter.
In response to Laura's question, and Elizabeth can help on this as well because she's part of this larger urban study. Elizabeth was like, "Wait, what?" But so yes, they're geographically in similar locations because they're all in the city boundaries. We have to choose beaver pond. I mean, the beavers are choosing the site. So in some ways, I'm not sure. not sure if I'm answering that question correctly about are they located in the same area? And Maura, I don't know if you're still on and you'd like to elaborate on your question or type more into the chat. But the watersheds are similar. And I think Elizabeth, would you agree with that?
So in Atlanta, it is a little different in that a lot of our urban development is old. It's from, you know, the early 1900s. And so there's no stormwater infrastructure in a lot of the in-town parts of Atlanta. And so the stormwater ponds that we used in our study are all farther out. They're more suburban, more recent development, just because that's our limitation. And that there was nothing we could do about that, you know. And that's one reason we're so interested in this question in Atlanta in particular is the beavers are in the older parts of the city. Can those beaver ponds play the role that we don't have a place to put stormwater ponds to play?
And I'll
Yeah,
also
and I guess
say
I was
that,
wondering if
oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna I guess I was just wondering if there were any sort of inherent differences between like if some of the differences in water quality inputs and outputs were due to inherent differences of like our stormwater ponds being put in grosser areas than where beavers are choosing to be, or the opposite. But you know, I'm just curious about like, are there any potential inherent differences between those two sites that could also be contributing other than just the beavers themselves?
So that's a really good question. And I'll let Elizabeth talk about Atlanta. I'll say for Charlotte that I would answer no, that our stormwater sites are in regular urban neighborhoods, just like our beaver sites. So there's no, at least for the ones that we've studied, none of our stormwater ponds are in particularly yucky areas. They're just, it's just normal urban yuckiness. And that, especially in Charlotte, our ponds don't infiltrate. And so I think one of the interesting comparisons about the beaver sites is that they do allow for infiltration and groundwater surface water interactions, and they have that greater complexity than our.
I think we lost Sandra. I would say that, you know, we see similar things in Atlanta, that if anything, because they're newer and more suburban, some of our stormwater sites are nicer than our urban sites, less likely to have in Atlanta human waste in particular.
Okay, anything else on that? Then I'll move on. So next, let's see, we had let's see. We moved over to Lauren's talk, and one question that I had myself on that was, Lauren, I know that Beaver Corps is out there. Are there other beaver flow device companies around the country that people, or how do people access those companies that do that work?
That's a great question. I was running short on time during my talk, so I didn't actually get to expand on the Beaver Corps training as much as I would have liked to, but happy for the opportunity now. So we actually, once our trainees are certified, and after they pass their initial coursework, they have the option to be posted on our website under our Find a Professional page. So if you go to the Beaver Institute website, excuse me, and you go to Help with Beavers, you will find a tab where you can go to find beaver professionals. You can search on your area to see who in the country is nearby. We don't require our members to post publicly in that format, but it is an option for them if they would like to. And we also do include other professionals that aren't necessarily Beaver Corps members, but if they have proven to us their skills and their actual ability to provide these solutions the correct way, then we will recommend them. However, we see a lot of devices that are improperly installed and they aren't actually effective at providing these solutions. So we only recommend people that that we know implements these techniques properly. Because sometimes in areas where, you know, again, I've mentioned the human element in my talk, sometimes you only have one shot to get this correct. So we only recommend people that we know are going to do these devices correctly. So I would check out the Beaver Institute website and you will find folks in your area. If you don't see anyone in your area, you can email myself or the Beaver Corps program director. And we might know of folks that we can directly connect you to that don't necessarily have their information out there publicly. So always just reach out to us and we're happy to help you however we can. But we need more people in the Southeast. Like, I'll be honest about that. We probably only have like one person who's going through our training right now in the Southeast. So if anyone at all is interested in providing these services, please consider joining. We do offer tuition assistance, especially in areas that we're lacking professionals in, which you would qualify for. So yeah, reach out.
Thank you for that, Lauren. Let's see now, here's another one. Rachel points out that lethal trapping should go hand in hand with making the site unsuitable for beavers, so that to discourage them from coming in the future. And yeah, I would say, well, Lauren, that's under your topic. Can you field that one?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question. That's why I probably didn't respond to Rachel. But no, so trapping would not fall under coexistence if that's what the end goal is. And definitely there are sites that aren't going to be suitable for flow devices or other techniques just because of the circumstances. In particular, we see this a lot out west in irrigation canals and ditches like that. Like, you're not going to be able to put in a flow device, or we've tried these techniques so many times that in those circumstances, trapping and relocating beavers is the best practice. It isn't, but that doesn't meet the definition of coexistence. So that's what we were talking about. That is accurate. That's why I kind of said, you know, it depends on the goals. The goals might be coexistence or they might be solving human beaver conflict. And ultimately, we have to make those judgment calls based on the circumstances and what is actually going to be effective. We don't want landowners spending a lot of money on a technique that we know isn't going to actually be successful. So that's our responsibility as professionals who are providing wildlife conflict services. But Rachel, if you want to clarify, just jump on and let me know what you're actually asking if that wasn't the answer you were looking for.
We'll give Rachel a second to jump on.
Hi, yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, when you look at the decision trees for beaver management plans and you're evaluating your different waterways, there's going to be waterways where beaver coexistence just can't take place for whatever reason. There's infrastructure that you have to protect, or a culvert protection system wouldn't work. Yeah, wrap the trees, remove the vegetation. Maybe you set up a food forest, you know, nearby where the beavers can be tolerated or where you can more easily coexist with them, and, you know, plant the species that they like to eat down there so that you're luring them away from the area that you can't tolerate them. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Well, I'll move on. So during Tracy's talk on the awakening respect for all sentient beings, Ray asked a question: do beavers utilize tree of heaven for food or dam construction? I know I've seen them using privet, but I don't know about tree of heaven. Does anybody had any experience with that?
I'll jump in real quick. I am absolutely finding that the beavers love privet, as you said. It is something that they really enjoy in a rehab setting. I'm cutting privet for them, and they're quite fond of it. They're not so excited by popcorn trees. I'm not sure about tree of heaven, but what we refer to as the popcorn trees down here, I do offer that to them. They're not as excited about it, but I think there is a lot of potential that beavers would utilize some of these invasive plant species and potentially help us in that control.
I can jump in on that too a little bit, Tony. specifically in our boundaries that are adjacent private property that don't control invasive shrubs in the way that Bernheim does. We have found that beavers will utilize bush honeysuckle and autumn olive to pretty great extent. I'm not sure if this is primarily for forage or if it's primarily for constructions of lodges and dams. I haven't specifically seen tree of heaven because we don't have large tree of heaven populations in those areas where we have our established beaver populations. So I can't speak to that directly, but they certainly will use invasive shrubs.
Yeah, and you talk about beavers being an ally in restoration. So many people deal with privet removal. If they're helping with that, boy, are they being a large value there. Tracy, you were talking about reaching out. I think you were reaching out to Jane during part of your advocacy work, and that's what one thing we're really hoping that the Southeast Beaver Alliance will be, is that network of people that is going to be the resource where we know who to reach to. And so I'm glad that came up during your presentation.
Well, I'm very grateful that to know about you all now, to be connected to like all of you experts, and I feel, yeah, you're such a resource. I had no idea that you all were out there when this all came up. So.
And thanks again to Jane. I think after today, we're going to be even a larger resource for people like you who are discovering us. And so now moving on to Evan's talk. Let's see. Mara asked of how successful BDA's beaver dam analogs are in flashy urban streams.
Yeah, I was kind of skeptical of BDAs being functional in flashy high relief streams in this part of the country in the first place. And really, these first several iterations of how we're installing these BDAs were really just kind of experiments to see proof of concept if these structures work. So the short answer is we don't really know. We have learned some lessons already. We know that the first iteration, where it's just the posts with the woven limbs, really don't do much to actually mimic beaver behavior. They might eventually collect some soil, they might collect some leaf debris and begin to back up water, but they're really not functional in beaver mimicry or habitat creation until the beavers come and build upon that. In the areas that we're using the true beaver mimicry, we're actually building a ramp with a woven mattress on the downstream side. We're finding that streams in Kentucky are so flashy, especially this year. We had an incredibly wet torrential year, and they can't function in that kind of environment. So what we've learned are a couple things. We need to use these hybrid methods of posts with woven branches along with the parallel branches with the stream. We haven't used stones yet. We want to start utilizing stones and use more compaction when it comes to the soil underneath the woven limbs. But I think our biggest lesson this year was do not install BDAs during the spring. It's much too flashy. Install BDAs during dry seasons. Allow that time for the beavers. We know that beavers in those locations where we install BDAs were within a couple hundred feet. There were beaver chews right next to where we installed the BDAs. So if they had just, I'm confident, some more time to enhance those BDAs, that they would have been more permanent, sustainable structures, more resilient. So those are our big takeaways. Seasonality and correct approaches that create resilient BDAs.
All right, thanks, Evan. Another question, Evan, is do you have any idea of the population of beavers at Bernheim?
So we have kind of had two major populations within Bernheim. There's our arboretum population that has been around for several years. That's the population that we used to live trap and relocate into the forest proper. We no longer trap them. We've allowed them to stay in their spaces in the arboretum. This is where a lot of what Lauren was talking about with coexistence strategies, where pond levelers, caging. We've caged probably 400 trees in the arboretum, making sure that our horticulture team can accomplish their goals and we can work with our horticulture team, preserve our collections, make sure that we are working sustainably with the horticulture team, but also that the beavers are allowed to do what they do. That population within the Arboretum, there are 2 lodges. We're guessing that there are 4 to 6 individuals in that lodge, in each one of those lodges. The population that was in the forest proper, we have not been able to find them in the past year and a half, 2 years. We're not sure if they've dispersed out of Wilson Creek and Harrison Fork, the 2 main streams that are in the interior of the forest, or if they have been illegally trapped. And we're not sure what's happened in that scenario, but we're hoping to build that habitat. The habitat's there. We want to incentivize them back in. So we have plans this coming year to do additional wetland installation, additional BDA installation. Hopefully this 1 mile of restored stream, as Elizabeth and Sander were talking about, that's what beavers want, right? We're hoping that brings them back into the interior of the forest. So we think that, it's around a dozen or so, but we're hoping to expand that population.
All right, thanks, Evan. One more, and you answered this one in the chat already, but I think it's worth repeating out loud. Is did you need any special permits at Bernheim for in-stream work?
Yeah, absolutely. And Tony, you can probably speak a lot more intelligently than I can about this. But we work really closely with Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Services, with the Division of Water in Kentucky and the Army Corps of Engineers for all of our large scale restoration projects. So all of those stream restoration projects, the wetland restoration projects, all of those large scale projects, we go through a permitting process. The Harrison Fork process has taken almost 2 decades. I mean, it's a very long process to get these stream restoration projects done. So that's kind of where we're at with permitting and hoping to learn more about how permitting functions in the BDA space. We're not entirely sure right now.
Yeah, probably the most useful permitting mechanism through the Corps of Engineers is the Nationwide Permit 27. If everybody wants to write that one down, Nationwide Permit 27. So a lot of the beaver work can be covered under that one. It's sometimes dependent on how the local Army Corps of Engineers district interprets that. But start looking there, Nationwide 27. Army Corps of Engineers, Nationwide Permit 27. Okay, now moving over to Holly's presentation. Patty asked, is your safe area fenced so that the beavers will stay in and they don't get away?
Yes. Yeah, so our soft release site is a 3-acre fully fenced in habitat with this new pond that we have built. And so the idea is that will be the area where they can go and have some level of boundary and protection. Of course, any beaver that wants to leave, if they are so inclined, will be able to do so. But we're also going to utilize this space for looking at possible ways to deter beavers from going into certain areas. So like there's certain areas of our fence that we are considering putting some light and sound boxes to see if that would be something where if they approach that area, they avoid it, just to look at some avoidance potential. But it is fully protected. And then once they go out into the full site, then they are fully wild and can do whatever they want to do.
Thank you. And then Susan had a comment question about the idea of the beaver fever myth, and her lake association had gotten the wrong idea that beavers were causing disease. Can you speak on that some, Holly?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a huge part of what I'm trying to accomplish here, especially being on One Health, in that One Health world. And, the newest studies have shown that beavers are really not going to be the carriers of Giardia. Like they got that bad reputation for a long time ago, is that, they called it beaver fever. And if you drank water out of your local pond that had a beaver in it, then you would catch Giardia. And, you know, the truth is humans were not necessarily putting good things into their water systems back in the day when this became really popular. And so it was easy to blame beavers, but it's going to be humans that ultimately were spreading Giardia during that time frame. But when I test all of our beavers are tested for Giardia. We have not seen one positive case yet. In fact, most of the issues that I have found with our beavers are coming from human influence situations, like the Balantidium, where the wild hogs were spreading it, and then with tulips, antibacterial resistant. Beavers have powerful antibodies to many things, but clearly they are also susceptible to issues. So it's want to do a lot more deep dives into these things, and I want to take it to different levels. But at this point, I feel confident in saying these beavers are not disease-ridden critters that are creating problems for humans.
Right. Thank you for that one. We got there's another one. Do the beavers on the toys? Do the beavers like a particular color toy? And has anyone done any work with them with the way dogs do with the beaver buttons that have the beaver word buttons? I mean, the dog word buttons.
Not that I'm aware of. Those are some really fun operant conditioning things that with the dogs, and it is super cute to see. And the beavers, we are watching to see about their perception of color, and if there is a preference. Those are one of the things that we are looking at. At this point, it seems pretty random, but certainly not out of the question. Really what I'm seeing with beavers is, their cognition, their behavior is very similar to other more complex social creatures. They just haven't received as much research. And so we're excited to dive in a little deeper about all that.
Oh, thank you.
I do hate to cut off this conversation, but we are at noon, and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, our speakers, our attendees. So I know we have more questions. I think we could answer questions about this all day. Certainly, we have everything in the chat written down. You all have at least access to my email if you want to send them to me. But to close up for the morning, so sad. As I promised, I did want to share all of our speakers' contact information. So if you want to take a second to take a screenshot of this or write something down, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of these individuals. Or if you go to our website, we do have I think it's info@southeastbeavers.org. You can send questions just to our group, but I hate to end our question time for the morning. And then lastly, I just wanted to thank you all so much for coming. It's been just a wonderful first event. I think everything went as well as it could have gone. We want you to stay connected with us in the future, like I said, at that website or at our social medias that have just recently launched on Facebook and Instagram at the Southeast Beaver Alliance. But the last thing I just wanted to say is thank you all so much for coming. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and that you stay connected with our group. But I don't know if any of our other members had a farewell they wanted to say before I let everyone go.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Upload it as we can. Bye.
Bye.